You've earned a reputation as one of the most feared criminals in your prison, and the guards have taken notice. No punishment could break you, and you were soon back in the yard causing mayhem. But that's about to change, because now you find yourself shackled on a prison bus, surrounded by guards and other prisoners with the same threat level as you. Your new home is going to be ready for you, because it's a prison designed for the most dangerous inmates in the entire correction system. You're headed for the place where inmates who can't be handled by minimum security, medium security, or even regular maximum security are held. You're headed for Supermax. You didn't get to where you are by going in unprepared, so you did all the research you could before your transfer. You haven't been intimidated by any prison before, and you're not going to start now. But Supermax is testing that. For one thing, it doesn't seem like you'll be able to rule over the yard like you used to. Supermax prisons are designed to provide long-term segregated housing for the worst of the worst, and those who head to Supermax usually don't leave. Some are going to be there for decades, but most inmates sent to Supermax are serving life sentences, one way or another. Almost every Supermax prison has a death row attached, unless it's in a state that doesn't have the death penalty. A Supermax prison has several key characteristics beyond being for long-term sentences. Their administration is powerful and has wide latitude to keep the inmates under control. That includes punishment without the opportunity for appeal or outside overview. Activities are limited compared to other prison types, with few opportunities for recreation, college classes, or support groups like you might find in other prisons. Guess you'll have to wait for your next prison to pursue that law degree. It's extremely rare for an inmate to be sentenced to Supermax at trial unless they're considered a pressing security risk to the public. Most inmates are sent after extensive trouble at other prisons. You consider it a badge of honor. But the thing that worries you the most about Supermax? Boredom. At your old prison, you kept busy. You were a regular fixture in the yard, working out and getting ripped. All the better to intimidate your fellow inmates and scrap with the guards. But at Supermax, security is much tighter. When you arrive, you are thoroughly searched. You're immediately taken to your cell. No cellmates to cook up schemes with here. Your cell is segregated, and you'll stay in it for 23 hours of the day. You got a toilet and some limited entertainment options, including approved books. Some jurisdictions offer a TV for inmates who stay on their best behavior, something that's never easy for you. You'll even be taking meals in your cell, delivered through a slot in the door. They're not taking any chances. It's a shame. Your favorite part of lunchtime was getting an extra dessert from some unfortunate new fish seated next to you. But what about that one extra hour a day? Finally, some recreation. You're let out into the yard and you're looking forward to stretching your legs, but good luck with that. Even when you're exercising, you're in a cage. Recreation time is spent in small, secure spaces, and inmates are either let out alone or with one other inmate. And the guards are always close by to make sure no one makes contact. You'll have to get used to being watched at all times. One of the most consistent parts of being in Supermax is that surveillance is everywhere. Closed-circuit cameras are pointed in every cell, and when an inmate is out of their cell, you can bet there'll be several guards right by to take them down should they try anything. You remember at your old prison when you were on work detail and you snuck off and hitchhiked to the next county. It doesn't look like you'll be pulling a repeat performance here. You won't have a roommate, but you can't help but wonder who's sharing this prison with you. You know it's the worst of the worst, and many of them have lengthy rap sheets like you. You got here one crime and fight at a time, but many of your fellow inmates got here a lot faster. High-security prisoners are often transferred to Supermax immediately, especially if the government's worried about someone trying to break them out pre-trial or after sentencing. If an inmate has ties to foreign radical groups or is a high-level drug dealer, they're likely to be sent here out of caution. You don't know if they're in this very prison, but notorious criminals ripped from the headlines, like the drug kingpin El Chapo or Russian spy Robert Hansen, are serving life sentences in Supermax. But you're not intimidated. You know you'll get an opportunity to get the drop on a guard, and you'll show everyone in here who's boss. After all, what's the worst they can do to you? You're already in Supermax. Well, the sight of another inmate yelling as they drag him down the hall might give you a clue. The rules in Supermax are enforced strictly, and there's usually only one punishment for breaking them: solitary confinement. But you're already in solitary confinement in your cell, right? Not quite. At Supermax, when you get sent to solitary, you're going to the hole. This windowless, featureless cell is very different from the one you're used to, and it's easy to lose track of time in there. If that's what awaits you, maybe picking a fight at the first opportunity isn't the best idea. At least there's some things to look forward to around here, including mealtime. You're not getting fine dining, that's for sure, but there's a pretty steady parade of decent fare, not that different from when you were in school. Ah, good old school days, intimidating the lunch lady for an extra portion of fries. For lunch, you might have scrambled eggs, a chicken sandwich, or tacos. For dinner, it's usually heartier fare like meatloaf, pasta marinara, or roast beef. There will also be a vegetarian option, and prisons work to accommodate special diets like allergies and religious needs. There goes that plan to escape by getting taken to the hospital with an allergic reaction. But if you're not satisfied with the meals, you've got one other option: the prison commissary. This is like a 7-Eleven at Supermax. If you've got someone on the outside willing to put money into your account, you can purchase anything you want from the shelves and have it brought to your cell. Treats include instant ramen, dried fruit, packaged taco fixins, and popular snacks from the outside world. Not exactly fine dining, but it's a taste of home that you're in dire need of. Just make sure you manage your money wisely. It's not like you can earn more through work detail like you did at your old prison. It doesn't take long and you're starting to go stir crazy. Your thoughts once again turn to escape. After all, how hard could it be? You haven't met a prison yet that could break you. Well, you might want to rethink that. Not only are those security cameras watching you at all times, but if you manage to get outside, you'll be up against the guard towers. You'll find yourself in a wide open space with nothing blocking the view from the armed guards above. There's a reason Supermax prisons are usually in isolated locations, not crowded urban centers. The fewer places there are to hide, the harder it is for you to get away. When a Supermax prisoner manages to escape, which happens rarely, the guards will try to capture them. But if they get far enough that it's only the guard towers between them and escape, well, they're not coming back to their cell one way or another. At least you're not as isolated as the people in the very first Supermax prison. They were taken by ferry to one of the most notorious sites in prison history, the famous Alcatraz Island, where freezing shark-infested water stood between them and escape. Alcatraz was considered a prototype for the Supermax facility when it was founded as a federal prison in 1934. The far-off location in San Francisco Bay made up for the lack of modern security, and it was very successful at keeping people on the island. There were 14 escape attempts over the years, with 23 being caught alive, 6 being shot while escaping, 2 drowning, and 5 never being found. Authorities believe these 5 men drowned and their bodies were lost, but many believe they escaped. The only prisoner to ever get off Alcatraz Island was John Paul Scott, who successfully swam all the way to shore, only to collapse from exhaustion on the beach and be quickly apprehended. Supermax prisons aren't on islands anymore because the government uses state-of-the-art technology to make sure prisoners are secure. For these federal inmates who the government wants to keep under lock and key, there's only one destination: ADX Florence in Fremont County, Colorado, often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It's home to virtually all of the country's most notorious federal prisoners, including foreign and domestic attackers, spies, organized crime bosses, cult leaders, and drug kingpins. Almost all are doing sentences of 20 years or more, with most doing life or awaiting execution. But there are over 50 prisons with Supermax facilities around the United States, most holding prisoners of different security levels. Supermax facilities in standard prisons are known as SHUs, or segregated housing units, and the prisoners in these units never interact with the lower security prisoners sharing the facility. Being here is gonna be pretty boring, and you're not optimistic about escaping, so it's time you find out how you're gonna keep yourself occupied. Well, they're obviously not going to let you wander around the prison, and exercise is strictly regulated. Amenities vary by prison, but most offer a library. Inmates make requests for books from the prison library and they're delivered to your cell, almost like a bookmobile. You don't think they'll give you books about how to tunnel out of your cell, so maybe it's time to catch up on some of those great American novels you didn't read in high school. Computer access is strictly limited and monitored, but some Supermax prisons allow for their use. It's even possible in some Supermax prisons to take remote college classes, with coursework being delivered remotely via mail. One thing's for sure: however you keep yourself busy in your new home, you'd better get used to doing it alone. The one thing you're not going to get in your new digs is socializing time. The good news is, there's one way you might be getting out of here sooner than the judge wants. Supermax prisons are coming under increasing fire from civil rights activists who say they amount to cruel and unusual punishment. The United Nations has condemned the way they're run, and a federal lawsuit against ADX Florence was filed in 2012 claiming chronic abuse and neglect. The suit was dismissed, but a campaign to abolish them continues. Adding to that momentum, they're extremely expensive to run. ADX Florence cost over $60 million to build in 1994, and the costs keep rising. Outfitting a Supermax can cost up to 3 times as much as a regular maximum security block, and many people question if it's money well spent. No one's looking to transfer El Chapo into general population, but advocates say many inmates could be better rehabilitated in a more integrated environment. If you want to survive Supermax, you'll need a few things. You'll need to be able to handle isolation. You'll want to take advantage of every opportunity you have for entertainment and comfort. reading, taking enrichment courses, getting special snacks from the commissary. Even if they're not exactly your cup of tea, your options are limited. You'll need to get your exercise in close quarters and stay off the guard's radar. Most of all, you'll need patience and maybe to sign some of those petitions to abolish Supermax prisons. Would you survive the first 24 hours in prison? Maybe, depends on if you know what to expect. Don't worry though, we got you covered in this video. From start to finish, we'll tell you what the first 24 hours in prison are really like, and what to do if you ever find yourself in this position. Introduction to the prison system starts before the accused is actually locked up, so you can think of this first part as a prequel to what's to come. The criminal needs to be tried and convicted by a jury of their peers, and then sentencing can occur. The inmate hears the words, "You've been sentenced to prison," and the next thing they know, they're being prepared for transfer to their new home. The inmate is placed in a transport vehicle to whatever prison will be their final destination. This could be a bus, a van, or some other secure vehicle which may house other inmates that are going to be locked up as well. Once the prisoner arrives, the intake process begins. This will take up the first few hours of their time in prison. The handcuffed inmate is led by armed guards from the transport to the reception area. This is where things get serious and a little uncomfortable. First, the inmate's identity is checked and put into the system. This is so their every move and action can be recorded while in prison, from what they eat to what cell they're contained in. When the prisoner was first arrested, their fingerprints and mugshot were taken during booking and entered into a government database. However, at some prison facilities, they will repeat this process for their own records. The inmates' ink-covered fingers are pressed against paper and scanned into the prison's documentation system. Then, they stand motionless in front of a plain backdrop as their mugshot is taken once again. Interestingly, in certain facilities like Rikers Island, the prison will collect the visitor's fingerprints as well. Once all the information is recorded and the prisoner is in the system, they receive a short orientation and the basic do's and don'ts of the facility. There will be more rules to come later, but the prison guards just want to make sure everyone's on the same page for this next part, because it's about to get really intimate. It's time for the strip search. At this point, the prisoner's probably been standing patiently for quite a while as all the paperwork got done. But now they need to take off all their clothing and prepare for one of the most uncomfortable moments of their life. The guard who conducts the strip search will not be gentle, but most certainly will be thorough. The guard runs their fingers through the hair of the prisoner to make sure nothing is hidden underneath. Then they open the inmate's mouth wide and stick their fingers deep into it to look under the tongue and back at the gums. Hopefully the prisoner doesn't have a sensitive gag reflex because the officer will be in there for a bit. They check the teeth to make sure none of them are false and concealing drugs or anything else. The guards check the nostrils and ears, then move to the rest of the body, rubbing and patting to make sure there's nothing under the skin. Then the real uncomfortable part comes. The prisoner is told to bend over and prepare for a cavity search. First, the genitals are inspected and then the rectum is thoroughly examined to make sure no contraband is hidden within. After the cavity search, the guard checks the legs and feet, does a once-over, and then it's time to move to the next part of the intake process. The prisoner gets dressed in their new standard issue clothing and is brought to the medical examiner for a quick checkup. Vitals are taken and a brief physical is conducted to make sure the inmate is in decent health. All of this information is recorded and the prisoner is sent to a holding room. At this point, the newly admitted prisoner has been in the intake process for a few hours. They receive further information about their stay in the prison by one of the administrators of the facility. All prisons are slightly different, but the intake process between them is normally pretty similar. The length and depth of orientation will vary depending on the institution. Some are thorough and give prisoners all the information they could ever need, others not so much. Sometimes the inmate just gets thrown into the mix without so much as a piece of friendly advice. After orientation, the inmates receive their bedroll, which contains sheet, blankets, towels, and shoes. This is all they'll be given besides the prison uniform on their body, so it's not uncommon for intake, the strip search, medical exam, and orientation to take 6 to 8 hours. So a third of the first 24 hours of a prisoner's first day consists of a lot of paperwork and unpleasantness, but that's nothing compared to what's to come. Next, the prisoner is led through the facility. They'll probably experience some harassment and name-calling. This can be a rite of passage and sometimes will be used to intimidate new prisoners and put them in their place. However, some inmates recount an eerie silence as they were brought to their cell. It's unclear which is worse. It also depends on the time of day, because each day in prison tends to be a monotonous copy of the day before. The inmate's probably pretty hungry at this point, but they missed breakfast and they'll have to wait until the next meal, which could still be hours away. Before anything else, they'll need to drop off their bed supplies at their cell. This is when they'll most likely meet their cellmate for the first time. Prisons claim to do a thorough background check and personality check to make sure the two inmates are compatible, and there's no bad blood between them. But it's unlikely this happens in every intake situation. All that new prisoner can hope for is that their cellmate's a nice person who wants to be let out early for good behavior. Since the new prisoner doesn't know what to expect, the first interaction could be pretty tense and go multiple ways. The guards may watch for a few moments, but once the door is shut behind them, the new cellmates need to figure it out for themselves. Depending on what time it is, the new inmate might get put to work immediately. If it's time for chores, they could be assigned to wash dishes in the kitchen, or maybe they'll be sent to the laundry room, where they'll fold freshly washed linens. Since they haven't shown the guards what they're capable of yet, the new prisoner will probably be asked to do menial tasks until work time is over, and they can move on to the next part of the day. If they haven't missed lunch from the long intake process, or if the prison even serves lunch, the new inmate will probably sit alone for their first meal. Hopefully, they'll be left to eat in peace, but this is not always the case. Depending on the prison and its inhabitants, they could be introduced to the hierarchy of the members at their new home. If left alone, the first meal is normally eaten by a new prisoner in silence, as they contemplate the predicament they found themselves in. At some point in the afternoon, the inmate will be given recreation time. They're likely halfway through their first 24 hours in prison at this point, and if everything has gone smoothly, they've only been violated by the prison guard during the strip search. Again, it depends on the facility, but oftentimes there will be some sort of outdoor space for the inmates to spend recreational time in. The new inmate probably hasn't made any friends yet, so they might just sit and watch a pickup game or the other prisoners work out. According to inmates who have been interviewed, the first day of recreation time is a little nerve-wracking. They normally just keep their heads down and wait for it to be over, because the next part of the day is what every prison movie makes out to be the worst place in the whole facility. After recreation time, it's shower time. New prisoners might skip this, but it's recommended that they keep good hygiene so they don't offend anyone else with their body odor, especially their cellmate. The new inmate grabs their towel and goes to the showers with the rest of the prisoners. Most accounts given by those who have been incarcerated say the shower process is nothing like the entertainment industry makes it out to be. But the new inmate is definitely on guard, especially if it's their first time in the prison system. After shower time, the day is slowly coming to a close, and the prisoner's first 24 are almost over. There will be dinner, because regardless of the prison, inmates are almost always given some sort of meal at the end of the day. However, the time at which they're fed can vary based on the facility, and some of the meal times are pretty strange. In some prisons, dinner can be served as early as 3 p.m., meaning that inmates go hungry until breakfast the following morning, which can be as late as 11 a.m. Depending on the facility, this may be their first meal of the day. The food probably isn't great, and for most first-time inmates, they will not have the resources necessary to order anything from the commissary during their first 24 hours, so they're stuck with whatever is on the prison menu for the night. That brings up an awkward problem for a new inmate. At some point, they'll need to use the bathroom, and if prison food doesn't agree with them, it could be a messy process. This is unfortunate because the toilet is in the cell, and their cellmate will have nowhere else to go while the new prisoner does their business. It's probably best for the new inmate to ask their cellmate what their preference is for bathroom use. But regardless of how either person feels when you gotta go, you gotta go. Needless to say, the first time going in front of the new cellmate is gonna be pretty awkward. Many federal prison facilities do allow structured time for inmates after dinner. This means that the new inmate may find their end of the day filled by an activity assigned to them by the medical professional that assessed them at intake. These activities could include Alcoholics Anonymous, religious meetings, anger management, or any number of other programs that are organized by the inmates themselves. The newly incarcerated probably won't have joined a group at this point, and may be given the time to watch television or write a letter to whoever's waiting for them on the outside. Again, it would depend on the prison and the inmate themselves, but the first 24 hours are pretty lonely. They most likely don't know anyone in the prison if it's their first offense, and people in prison are not always the most welcoming since they tend to have trust issues. After around 12 to 18 hours in the prison, the new inmate is sent back to their cell, where the door is locked, and they're left to stare at the underside of the bunk or the ceiling. The lights will remain on as the guards do their round and check to make sure everyone made it back to their cells okay. Around 11 p.m., the lights go out and the echoes of whispers and snoring fill the cell block. The new inmate probably doesn't know their cellmate well enough to talk to them yet, so they lie in silence. Sleep probably is a long way off, if it even comes at all. Many inmates recount their first night in prison as restless. They toss and turn, playing and replaying the events that led them to that moment through their mind. In some prisons, when it's lights out, inmates are to remain silent, but this is not true everywhere. The new inmate might end their first 24 hours in prison listening to conversations being held between cells, or the sobs of prisoners who are slowly losing their minds. Regardless of which prison a new inmate finds themselves in, they probably won't sleep much that first night. They'll just lay in the darkness, waiting for the sun to rise the following day, and the next 24 hours of their prison sentence to begin. You've been serving your time, doing what everyone told you to do, which was keep your head down, be polite but not overly friendly, don't gamble, don't borrow, don't stare, don't take drugs, and do what the guards tell you to do. So far, so good. In spite of the fact that you spend a lot of time in a small box, it's at least your own box. You've decorated the walls with photos of your family. You have a shelf lined with educational books and classic novels you've always wanted to read. You keep the place spotless, and you've even got a small working area where you've created some delicate and complex paper ornaments. It's not home, but you've done the best you can. Then out of the blue, there's a bang on the door. Your cell is going to be searched, or should we say, tossed, like a Greek salad. Even though you're a model prisoner, that doesn't mean you won't have your cell searched. Certainly at times the guards might have a tip-off about one particular person, but sometimes an entire floor might get searched if guards believe something is being hidden in one of the cells. You might be the good guy, but who says you haven't been ordered to hide the thing they're looking for? Prison is sometimes a place where saying no is not an option. What would guards usually be looking for? Well, weapons for one thing. If some dude had been sliced down the cheek or has a hole in his back, then a weapon was used. The tool might be a knife-like device, sometimes called a shiv or a shank, and prisoners might be quite ingenious about concealing those things. What that ingenuity means for you is nothing in your cell will be left unturned. The guards aren't going to look under the bed and give you the "all clear, okay Officer Johnson, nothing to see here, let's move on to the next cell and check under that bed." That's not going to happen. Prisoners can sharpen bits of tin and then connect it to a toothbrush or something else, and that sharp object can usually be hidden in all sorts of places, in bedding and clothing and books, in light fixtures, even concealed in food items. You might also have drugs concealed in deodorant bottles, pills that have been crushed and made into a paste that can go unnoticed in things like toothpaste. So if guards are looking for drugs or weapons, they're going to go through everything. Your cell will literally be turned upside down and inside out. If guards are looking for prison booze, sometimes called pruno or hooch or mash, that isn't exactly easy to hide. If you get searched for that, it will very likely be found. In some Arizona prisons, the hooch would be kept in the ceiling where the intense heat would speed up the fermentation process. How do they manage to make booze inside, you might ask? Well, it's a pretty simple concoction made from various fruits, candies, raw sugar, water, and bread for the yeast. Leave that to ferment with the occasional burp so it doesn't blow up, and you have a drink that most prisoners look forward to, if not call nasty. Some brewers are better than others, and if you're good, you might just get on the right side of some fellow prisoners. The guards might also be looking for contraband of any sort, which just means prohibited goods. What's prohibited all depends on where you are imprisoned and what privileges you have. There's a big difference from playing Mario Kart on a game console to looking at 4 walls in a maximum security hell. Okay, so now you know why you might get searched. Let's have a look at how the operation happens. Firstly, you will likely not know that you're going to be searched, but if something has gone off in the prison, you might well know it's coming. Prisoners have a sixth sense regarding what's around the corner. Those guys who come to visit you have all been told how to conduct a search, and one thing is drilled into them is never ever be complacent. Never underestimate how good these guys can be at hiding stuff. You are staying in what might be called a gallery of cells, how most of us think about prison. But let's remember, prisoners might also stay in a large dormitory, each sleeping on a bunk. Today's a search of your ordinary one-man prison cell. How this will go down might depend on why you're being searched. If it's just a routine check, then it might be a bit smoother than if it's a search following an attack in which an alleged snitch got a stitch or 10. This is also a good time to tell you that we are talking about prisons in the USA today. It's very likely that prisoners in Norway, even if they are in for serious crimes, will be spared the loss of dignity during a search. It's also likely those prisons aren't filled with gang members fashioning shivs out of melted Jolly Ranchers. On those routine searches, you might just be asked to wait outside. The shakedown might only be a quick look around. Sometimes the guards aren't looking for anything in particular, but they do perform a cursory search to see if there's damage to the cell. Missing bits of plastic or metals might mean some sinister craftsman is making a weapon from what you gave him. Sometimes the guards will just be looking to see if the cell looks exactly like it should. There's also the possibility that you might have annoyed some guards or been seen as a threat, and while you'll hear some guards saying they never go in there to totally disrupt the place, it certainly does happen. Nonetheless, in most cases, they will need probable cause for a proper shakedown. In this case, you might get your house tossed, and that means after the search, your cell is going to look like a bear and a gorilla just went toe-to-toe in there. We know we talk a lot about bears and gorillas here at the Infographics Show, but we think this is a good comparison. Every page of every book will be turned, and no, they won't place all your books neatly back on the shelf in the alphabetical order you had them in. The spines of the books is where a lot of contraband is often hidden, so your books might get damaged. Any fabrics such as bedding will get torn and the filling might be pulled out and inspected. They'll open any container looking for compartments you might have made. If there are drawers, they will be rifled through and the contents might get thrown on the floor. They have to empty that thing and it's not like they're gonna fill it for you again. If they find some petroleum jelly container in there, they might open that up and even shine a light in there. And yes, they might open up your beloved food packages. Why, you might ask, if they're sealed? Well, prisoners have been known to open stuff and reseal it. They might also have gotten something in there through a very small hole. As for those many letters sent by your loved ones, they'll also be rifled through. Envelopes can be a good hiding place, especially if there's a stack of them. Some prisons don't even allow envelopes, but if it's legal documents, they might not have a choice. The guards will also search every nook and cranny of the cell itself, from edges of the shelf to the lights to the bunk to the sink and to the toilet bowl. Razor blades can be embedded in frames, while roof tiles might have been moved to get something in between them. Also, where the toilet and sink meet the wall, there might be a small crevice to hide things. If there are electrical appliances in there, they might open them up. You might not have a screwdriver handy and the guards know that, but they also know you guys have a lot of time on your hands to make something that will open that appliance. Even an old pair of stinky shoes might get pulled apart if they really think you're hiding something. At times, you might be handcuffed and strapped with ties, and while your room is being torn apart, you are being stripped and searched. This can happen in the middle of the night and fast. In some cases, when you return, it'll look like your cell's been ransacked and things might be torn and broken. It might also happen when you're working or eating. So the type of search or shakedown all depends on what's happened, if anything at all, who you are, what you might allegedly be hiding, and the personality of the guards in the prison itself. It can be ruthless, but it can also be smooth and tidy. Your paper ornaments and books and food items might all get ripped apart, or it might look as if no one has been in there. It all depends on the situation. Imagine a man trapped in a room that's 2 paces across and 4 paces long. His bed is a concrete slab with a small rubber mattress and a thin blanket. His desk has only a concrete stool, and no matter where in this tiny room he lingers, his toilet is never further than a few feet away. He hasn't seen the sun in weeks, and when he's allowed outside, he is quickly shuttled to a caged-in area that is just 4 paces across and 8 paces long. Inside is a deflated soccer ball and nothing more. This man is only allowed to write to or receive mail from a very restricted list of individuals, and any outgoing letters undergo intense scrutiny and censorship, taking up to 3 months to be delivered. A reply letter undergoes the same process, and if not rejected outright, will take another 3 months before the man can read it. You're just imagining this cruelty, but for many, it's a daily reality that they have lived in for years. Welcome to H Unit at Colorado's Federal Supermax Prison, otherwise known as Hell on Earth. Isolation, solitary, or special housing units have been a punitive measure employed by prisons for centuries. While in the past a prisoner may have been thrown into solitary on a whim, today in our modern prison system it's supposed to be used only as a punishment for prison offenders or for the safety of individuals who may be at risk within the general population. Though solitary is meant to punish bad behavior and ostensibly to correct it, psychological studies dating back over the last 150 years have consistently shown that solitary confinement is extremely psychologically harmful. Individuals kept in solitary for long amounts of time can develop a form of PTSD and can become extremely averse to loud noises or bright lights. They exhibit extreme antisocial behaviors, which can be counterintuitive when the goal of the incarceration is to correct bad behavior. Instead of teaching an inmate a lesson, solitary confinement can in fact make an inmate even more dangerous and aggressive. In one famous case, an inmate released straight from isolation into parole at the end of his sentence murdered Colorado Department of Corrections Executive Director Tom Clements. The inmate had spent years in solitary confinement, getting only an hour of exercise a day if the staff allowed it, which they often did not, in an outdoors cage where he remained, you guessed it, alone. Then one day he was a free man and promptly took revenge for his treatment. Solitary had turned a dangerous man even more dangerous and had clearly failed its intended purpose. Crime must be punished. That's a basic tenet of any nation which operates under the rule of law. But where is the line drawn between punishment and torture? Many Americans today, on both the left and right of the political spectrum, agree that solitary confinement for extreme lengths of time is inhumane, and the data clearly shows that it's counterproductive to rehabilitation. Yet it remains a popular punishment at many modern prisons. Think back to the man at the start of the show. He lives in a cell that is 2 paces across and 4 paces long, sleeps on a concrete slab, has only a concrete stool to sit on, and lives and eats with his open-faced toilet always within arm's reach. He hasn't been allowed to send or receive mail in months, and on average might look forward to 2 letters a year maximum. The longest conversations he holds are with the guards that bring him his food, and these are over in seconds. He's lived in the same tiny cell for years, and with a life sentence, he will most likely remain there until the day he dies. For most people, that scenario sounds nightmarish, and some part of their humanity still cries out for at least some basic compassion for someone sentenced to life in prison. Keep them locked up by all means, but is it really necessary to keep them imprisoned in such a tiny cell for the rest of their lives? Now, we want you to think about that man again, and ask yourself, what if that man was a terrorist? Would your feelings on his basic rights and treatment change at all? The hypothetical scenario we've been having you think about is not hypothetical at all, but rather a reality for dozens of inmates held at H Unit in Colorado's federal Supermax prison. These inmates range from drug lords to major gang leaders and terrorists, and include domestic Christian as well as Muslim radicals. Al-Qaeda operatives live next door to white supremacists who have planned massive acts of violence against minority communities and been caught the same as their Islamic terrorist counterparts. Known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, this is where the federal government sends the most dangerous men in America. For these men, they live life inside a prison that is itself within a prison. Forbidden from contact with the general population, they instead spend 23 hours a day locked up in their tiny cells. Described by a former warden as a clean version of hell, civil rights attorneys have argued that it was more accurately a dirty version of hell. That's because for years the federal government also kept its most psychotic prisoners locked up here, where they mutilated themselves, talked to ghosts, and lived in feces-smeared isolation cells for months at a time. Even for the non-psychotic prisoners though, H Unit is hell on earth. These individuals are subject to what are known as Special Administrative Measures, or SAMs, measures which govern the rights of prisoners who are deemed to pose a serious ongoing threat to public safety and national security. On top of their extreme isolation, SAM prisoners are not allowed any contact with the outside world whatsoever, aside from a very carefully selected and screened number of contacts that typically only include close family members and their attorneys. This is because of the fear that a prisoner may communicate via code to criminal or terrorist organizations around the world. In fact, one such case happened in 2005, when 3 prisoners wrote letters to suspected terrorists in Europe exhorting jihad. The prisoners denied that their letters were anything more than generic personal communications, but the FBI considered the incident a serious security lapse. Now, the people a prisoner under SAM restrictions are allowed to contact is severely limited, and the individual on the receiving end of a letter has to be vetted by federal law enforcement officials before being approved for contact. That makes for a rather short list of people that a SAM prisoner may be able to communicate with, and even then their letters are thoroughly screened and censored, a process which can take months. Replies are also screened just as thoroughly, adding months on the way back. As one prisoner noted, he simply gave up writing letters to his mother, as it would take 3 months for her to receive it and 3 months for him to receive a reply. These prisoners are afforded very limited phone calls, and the ones they are allowed to place are extremely restricted and very closely monitored by FBI and Bureau of Prisons, who listen to every word. Even then, phone privileges are very few and far between, which makes keeping up with the lives of loved ones practically impossible. Until only recently, SAM prisoners were not allowed to watch news broadcasts at all, for fear that modern-day events might inflame some radical thoughts and behavior. Of what limited television time a prisoner may have, which is afforded only to SAM inmates who have earned Tier 3 privileges after years of good behavior, channels are often simply blacked out. Things such as newspapers and magazines are on a 30-day delay, and political articles are ripped out of the magazines before being given to prisoners. Day-to-day life involves their tiny 75-square-foot cell where they stay for 23 hours a day. While they're supposed to be allowed 1 hour of outside recreation per day, often this doesn't happen if the short-handed staff is too busy or if they simply don't feel like allowing the prisoner out. When they do get to experience their 1 hour of rec, they must do so in a metal cage that is approximately 4 paces wide and 8 paces long, or about twice the size of their cell. Often prisoners can enjoy a basketball hoop and a deflated soccer or basketball. Still, for men who have spent a decade or more being locked up alone in a tiny cell, just being outdoors again is a reward enough. H-Unit prisoners do not have their own shower as most solitary units do, and instead they are escorted to a shower several days each week. However, this too can be disrupted by lockdowns or staffing issues. One prisoner, Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalab, otherwise known as the failed underwear bomber, explained what his life inside H Unit was like recently. He claimed that prison staff harassed him for his religion and did their best to disrupt his practice of it. He says that he was given no access to a halal diet, and corrections officers would often mock him and desecrate both his Quran and prayer rug. He also says that he was subjected to humiliating strip searches in front of female staff, something deeply offensive for devout Muslims. If the list of abuses sounds familiar, it's because many of these same abuses were being regularly carried out on prisoners in the infamous Abu Ghraib prison by U.S. service members. Abdul Muttalib was also forbidden from praying with others in his religion's mandatory group prayers, and he had little if any access to the contracted imam. While he used to be housed in a regular super-maximum security prison, once he was moved to H Unit, contact with many of his friends and relatives with which he'd been allowed to correspond for years was cut off, including with his own sister. Books he ordered from Amazon to help him pass the time were also rejected without reason. Curiously, one such rejected book was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, the Japanese art of decluttering and organizing. Abdul Muttalib's treatment is hardly unique, and a recent complaint filed in federal court states that Mr. Abdul Muttalib experiences life in H Unit at ADX as a struggle to avoid becoming mentally ill. The stories of other prisoners brought to life by the federal complaint paint a picture of life at H Unit as a slow journey into oblivion, a relentless whittling away of family ties, memories, hopes, and even a sense of self. Nidal Ayad, another inmate, says that if he had heard some of the stories of what happens inside H Unit 5 years ago, he would have thought that they were crazy. But now he tells of prisoners so deeply disturbed by their years of isolation that they warn him to turn off his cell's light because it emits harmful radiation. These prisoners live inside dark cells day and night, and some even claim that hot water is poisonous and harmful. Clearly, the mental stress of living in isolation has created a host of psychological problems for these individuals. It can be easy to disregard these complaints and simply write off H Unit's inmates as nothing more than the scum of humanity, who deserve exactly what they're getting. And with some of the world's most dangerous drug lords, gang leaders, and terrorists locked up inside, it's tempting to agree with the sentiment. Yet the conditions inside H Unit speak loudly about our own values. But we shouldn't let the hatred and violence of others compromise our own values and the nation we strive to be. It's eerily quiet on the cell block, and the doors that morning haven't been opened as they usually would be. Suddenly, the inmates hear the thudding of footsteps. It's a shakedown. Some inmates frantically search for the best hiding places to put their contraband. One of the guards shouts to the prisoners with an offer: "Give us the contraband before we find it, and you won't get charged." Yeah, right, think most of the men who've spent a few years in prison. There'll be no amnesty, or at least in the past, some guards didn't make good on their promise. One particular inmate has a lot to fear. As the guards approach his cell, he tries his darndest to fit half a pack of Wrigley's Juicy Fruit chewing gum into a small wall crevice behind the wash basin. He's in a lot of trouble if they find that stuff. Like most people, you might wonder why prisoners can get in so much trouble for having some harmless chewing gum. In this case, the prisoner, let's just call him Bill after the founder of Wrigley's Gum, had no intention of just chewing that stuff merely for enjoyment's sake. Bill wasn't concerned about his bad breath, and he wasn't a gum chewer because he was suffering from stress or had a bad habit of grinding his teeth. What Bill really wanted to do with that gum was make an impression of a key he thought he could steal and then later return. You see, once you have that impression, you have a good chance of replicating the key. And in prison, you could say keys are the last thing prison staff want prisoners to get their hands on. Another thing gum can be used for is jamming door locks, which could be a huge problem for officers when an inmate is intent on self-harming or causing some serious facial damage to another inmate. Those are the two main reasons that chewing gum in prison is banned. Now let's have a look at some other everyday items that are usually verboten in the penitentiary. Some of them we're sure will come as a surprise to you. Well, unless you've been around the prison blocks yourself. A lot of prisoners pass the time by sketching or writing diaries, or perhaps writing the next great American crime novel. And while paper is for the most part allowed, one thing prisoners can't have are spiral-bound notebooks. You know, those ones with the rings holding the thing together. You might automatically think that the reason is because the metal rings can be fashioned into weapons. And you'd be right, but there's another reason. That's because if a prisoner has some smarts, he or she might be able to pick a lock with a device made from those rings. The next one, from what we can see, only applies to prisoners in England and Wales. This rule was introduced only in 2013. Some prisoners over there can get through many hours enclosed within those prison walls by watching movies. There's not always good movies on TV, and so the prisoners might have the choice to watch DVDs. Okay, so that's good for them, and if they want, they might even rewatch old prison escape movies such as The Great Escape or The Shawshank Redemption. But there's one kind of DVD they cannot have, and those are movies that have an R rating. You might think that sounds pretty stupid when a lot of those men have actually lived R-rated lives, but back in 2013, the Justice Secretary said he no longer wanted inmates watching violent movies or films that depict too clearly how babies are made. Back to the US, and censorship there is also alive and well, but this time we're talking about various books being banned in certain states. Texas has banned 12,000 books in its prisons, with some of those being classics written by the likes of William Shakespeare and the man that penned Big Brother is Watching, George Orwell. For a while in Colorado's prisons, you couldn't even get your hands on Barack Obama's 2 memoirs because the state said they were potentially detrimental to national security. That decision was later reversed. But a lot of activists in the US still say book banning in prisons on such a wide scale defies logic. One of the most popular books in the US prisons and other prisons around the world is called The 48 Laws of Power. In a dog-eat-dog environment, this could be said to be essential reading. Ask the rapper 50 Cent. It became so popular that a bunch of US prisons have now banned it. Moving on, getting a good night's sleep in prison can be hard because of the noise, but also because of the lights. One thing you'd think that the prison commissary would sell is sleep masks. But if they aren't available in the prison store, then technically they are classified as contraband. We found one prisoner whose hustle was making prison masks, but he was in fact breaking the rules. It seems that earplugs are usually available, so at least an inmate can block out the noise. As for the next one, some of you will immediately know why it's considered contraband, while our more innocent viewers may have to think about it. In prison, you're not allowed to store any of your bodily fluids, and that goes for all fluids that can possibly come out of your body. We don't think we need to go into too much detail. It doesn't matter if some prisoners have adopted an alternative health kind of lifestyle and have decided to imbibe their own urine. You just can't keep that stuff. The reason is some crazed or aggrieved inmates might fashion some kind of squirting device and fire the liquid at the guards. This is something prisoners refer to as gassing. One big pain in the exterior for a lot of prisons is the fact that they're not allowed to take lists into prisons of addresses and telephone numbers. Some prisoners will just have to remember the important numbers and addresses and then write them down on paper they're given. In time, they can get more numbers and addresses from people they call or write to. We found one guy that wrote his numbers down in a Bible he'd been given, but in some prisons you're only allowed a certain kind of Bible, the soft kind. It differs from prison to prison, but in some places you might only be able to order a certain number of books, and those books might have to have softbacks. The reason for this is that those large hardbacks might make a good hiding place for a prison knife, and while hiding a shank in the spine of a Bible might seem immoral, it's been done before. Another reason is that a 1,000-page encyclopedia with a rigid hardback would hurt a bit if you were hit over the head with it. Sometimes prisoners accidentally find themselves with contraband, and that might be because they've been sent some legal paperwork from their attorneys. There have actually been cases of prisoners getting in trouble for having staples and paper clips that were part of a package sent by an attorney. A staple or two might not make a good weapon, but one thing staples are good for is making tattoo needles. As for paper clips, those harmless things, if used correctly, can help a man to get out of his handcuffs. Basically, anything metal and pointy is not allowed in prison, mainly because it can be used to puncture things or unlock things. You should also know that prisoners can't just store lots of certain items. Sure, there are hoarders in prison, but those guys often find themselves on the wrong side of the guards. It could be something as harmless as toilet paper, but if you have enough of that stuff and a lot of time on your hands, you could harden it until it becomes something known as the toilet paper shank. This is also the reason prisoners might not be allowed to have full-length pencils, because they could be used to put a hole in the person. What prisoners are usually given are short pencils referred to as golf pencils. It depends which prison you're in and what kind of security unit you're housed in, but often all a prisoner will have to write with is one of those golf pencils. This is a real pain for some prisoners who write a lot, and they've been known to modify them and make them longer. Sticking with pencils, if you add enough water to the graphite, you can make something to put on your face. In women's prisons, believe it or not, makeup might be available to buy at the commissary, but that's not always the case. Sometimes women or men who like to wear makeup can use the shells of M&Ms and mix them with water. Once a prisoner has the candy and has the palette, all kinds of colors can be made. While this is hardly the crime of the century, once those candy shells become makeup, they're contraband. As for jewelry in federal prisons in the US, you can wear wedding rings without stones or engravings in them, and you can get away with a necklace if it has a religious medallion connected to it, but any jewelry shouldn't have a value of over $100. People have actually been killed with jewelry, and if it's worth too much, someone might kill you for it. In 2010, in one U.S. prison, an inmate asked another inmate to try on his religious necklace, after which he strangled him with it. In one prison handbook, we found that this was against the rules: manufacturing of dice, dominoes, chess sets, cards, or any other form of games. Okay, it's against the rules, but it happens. Prison wouldn't be prison if inmates didn't have dice that they had made out of toilet paper, and some prisoners have been known to take the time to create an entire chess set. It's not easy to do, but one prisoner said he had making such things down to a fine art. And he had a template, since when his cell was shaken down, he always lost his instruments for game playing. He said sometimes things need to be stuck together, which wasn't always easy in prison because glue is hard to come by, but there's always an alternative though, since the stickers on shampoo bottles and toothpaste can be used as an adherent. A lot of games are banned simply because they can lead to gambling. Gambling can lead to sore losers and also to prison debt, and in turn that can lead to fighting and at the very worst, death. It all depends on where you are and who's guarding you, but some staff will turn a blind eye to such activities. If there is a shakedown, well, blind eyes are not usually turned in those circumstances. We found one prisoner who said while incarcerated, he and other inmates would go to great lengths to create the tools needed to play Dungeons and Dragons. In the day room, you'd find an Aryan Brotherhood table and a Mexican Mafia table, and close by, you'd find the Dungeons and Dragons guys. The guard would mostly allow them to play, but he said the problem was when a newer guard would find an elaborate game map that they'd created and automatically think it was an escape route from the prison. When that happened, things turned a little serious. One such occasion, a young guard was about to confiscate the map when an older guard approached him and said, "Don't worry, that's no escape plan, it's a Dungeons and Dragons map." In response to that, the younger guy just called him a nerd. Okay, so this last one is hardly a household item unless you include human beings as being items. We found in some prisons when inmates have gotten lonely, they've created, well, how do we say this? They've created a partner. Someone to hold and love and cherish during those long hours locked up. Homemade lovers are not on the list of allowed items though, and so if you get caught with one, you could find yourself having to explain it to the guards. If there is one person the U.S. authorities do not want escaping from prison, it's the notorious Mexican drug kingpin, one Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. This man, from meager beginnings, the son of a farming family from Sinaloa, became an enemy #1 of the United States, and a very rich man too. They have him locked up now, but El Chapo has escaped from prison before. Not once, but twice. So it goes without saying that right now he is guarded like no one else on the planet. Could this criminal Houdini get out again? Let's have a look. First, let's see how he managed to escape from prison the first time. In 1993, the LA Times ran the headline, "Mexico arrests reputed top drug kingpin." He was arrested in Guatemala, not far from the Mexican border. The charges against him were murder, kidnapping, and of course, drug trafficking. The authorities said he was behind a huge trafficking operation in a massive tunnel that ran from Tijuana to San Diego, where drugs were carried through. Digging tunnels, as you'll see, was something of a forte for Guzman and his crew. He was extradited to Mexico and got 20 years 9 months to be served in a maximum security prison. There, it said he controlled the place and lived in comfort, with the guards doing what he told them to do. While he could easily run his operations from there, as time went by, he feared extradition to the US. It was time to go. It was January 19, 2001 when he made the first escape. A prison guard named Francisco El Chito Cambreros Rivera opened the electronic door to his cell when Guzman hid himself in a laundry basket. He was pushed through a series of doors and eventually got out of the main door. From there, he was taken in the trunk of a car to a designated spot, and when the time was right, he took off into the night. Like that, he was gone. It might sound too easy, but it was found out that he not only had guards on his payroll, but also the prison director. Even the cops were paid to make his getaway into the night that much easier. It turned out to be a bit of an embarrassment for the Mexican authorities. All the bribes Guzman paid added up to around $2.5 million. So this could never happen again, right? Wrong. He kept on doing what he did and became Mexico's most wanted man. But despite that, he managed to evade capture. Then on the 22nd of February 2014, after an operation between Mexican and US authorities, he was captured again. They had him, and they thought that was it. He was not going to bribe his way out of prison this time. When being moved around, he was surrounded by the military and the police. Even the A-team couldn't have made the plan come together to extricate this guy from the arms of the law. This time, he was locked up in a very restricted area. His cell had no windows and he had little contact with anyone. He had a Spartan cell, and this time no luxuries. A bed, a shelf, a shower, a toilet bowl, and a basin. That's what he got. He was allowed some visits and he had the right to receive the maximum amount of money to buy hygiene products. That was about $48 US. Not so much for the man who had millions. He could take an hour out of his cell a day, but the guards were told not to communicate with him. How on earth could he escape a second time then? Well, on the 11th of July, 2015, he did just that. You see, there was a blind spot for the security cameras, and that was where the shower was. At close to 9 p.m. that night, he was seen going to that part of the cell, and that's where he vanished. Prior to that, for months, El Chapo's men had been digging a tunnel, and the end point was at that shower cell. The digging had been so noisy at times, some of the other inmates had complained about strange noises. El Chapo's wife, Emma Coronel, played a big part in orchestrating the escape. El Chapo had landed not far from the prison where the digging began, and he had even managed to get a smartwatch smuggled into his cell so the diggers knew the coordinates. This was some escape, and the tunnel even had ventilation and lighting. To get out fast, El Chapo used a motorbike, but it was especially made to run on rails. This contraption was also used for the excavation process. Authorities later said the tunnel was 0.93 miles long, 5 feet 7 inches high, and 30 inches in width. It was 33 feet underground, and so El Chapo used a ladder to get down there. He was a free man, but his freedom didn't last very long. After an armed raid at a residence on the 8th of January 2016, Guzman managed to get away, once again using tunnels. He was captured shortly after though. Now, the USA wanted him again, and the proceedings got in the way to extradite him. Guzman's men tried anything to prevent this from happening, and even assassinated a federal judge. It didn't work. He was finally extradited on January 9, 2017 to the USA, exactly 18 years after this first prison escape. Right after his sentencing, in which he received life in prison plus 30 years, he just disappeared. That's because on his way to prison, the safest bet was to take him to an undisclosed location. Even Guzman's lawyers didn't know where he was. It was later revealed that he ended up at what's called America's highest security prison. That is the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado. It's known in short as ADX Florence. This is where the worst of the worst go. In prison terms, it's the end of the road. There are way more guards here to the number of inmates than at other prisons. Inmates are locked up 23 hours a day. When they are allowed out, it may come at any time, day or night. So even if somehow a plan could be devised by the people on the outside, they wouldn't know when their guy was out of his cell. The 7 by 12 feet cell has a bed, a stool, and a desk all made of poured concrete. The cells are soundproofed so prisoners can't shout and communicate with each other. The inmates never know where they are in the facility because they never see through a window that will allow them to guess their location. Even when they can exercise, it is not a yard, but an empty swimming pool, so they can't see over the walls. It's not a big one either, and it only takes 10 steps to walk from end to end. All over the prison there are motion detectors and cameras, and the thick steel doors can only be opened with remote control. Officers monitor all parts of the prison from a control room, and if anything strange should happen, they can hit a panic button which will automatically lock every door in the prison. The prison also has pressure pads, so an alert is sent if someone should stand on one of those pads. If someone could somehow get past the pressure pads and the cameras and get outside, they would have to scale a 12-foot tall razor wire fence, and they'd have to do that in front of heavily armed guards in one of the many towers. Other guards will walk around with attack dogs. It's very likely that Guzman is also in the most secure unit of this ultra-secure prison, which is called Range 13. By the way, guards at this prison are vetted to prevent anyone corrupt getting a job. While working, they're told to communicate with the prisoners as little as possible. It's escape-proof is what most people say, and it's not a nice place to end up. A former warden once described it like this: "This Supermax is life after death. It's long-term. In my opinion, it's far much worse than death." Others have said how eerily quiet the place is because no two inmates move at the same time. It's very clean, everything is spotless, so when journalists have gone in, they've been very surprised. It might look as bright as heaven if it weren't hell. In fact, that's how one warden described it, like a clean version of hell. He told 60 Minutes, "I don't know what hell is, but I do know the assumption would be for a free person, it's pretty close to it." This is how one inmate described it. The purpose is to gradually tear a person down mentally and physically through environmental and physical deprivation. For an inmate, it's kind of like having the place to yourself. Some people have said, because it's like this, the only way a person could escape would be if they actually had the prison warden in their pocket, which is never going to happen. There are only around 400 inmates, some of whom include Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and Terry Nichols, the Oklahoma City bomber. Just to get near the place, you'd be spotted, and Guzman can forget about buying land near it. This prison is in a remote location. There's not much for miles around. Guzman has visitors, but only his lawyer and his 2 daughters have been allowed to see him. He cannot actually touch anyone who visits him. He's told his lawyer because of the oppressive conditions, he regularly throws up, has headaches, and also sinus trouble. He said it's also very hard to sleep because the lights are on all the time. If prisoners do want to break from the monotony, they at least have a TV, but that only plays religious and educational programs. This is how another person who's retired from the prison described this place. Supermax is austere, and it's run with absolute structure and security in mind. From an operational perspective, it's the most secure prison on Earth. But if the man known as Papillon escaped from the notorious Devil's Island penal colony, and if those 3 guys really did escape from Alcatraz, maybe no prison on Earth is 100% secure. Just about anyone in the corrections business would disagree, but maybe El Chapo could get out of this one. What are the chances of Mr. Guzman escaping from the place nicknamed the Alcatraz of the Rockies? Let's think about it. If he were to get out of his cell, maybe he'd have to do that by bribing a guard. But they've been vetted. Perhaps the only way a guard would offer him help would be because Guzman's men had kidnapped his family. But as only one man moves at a time, that prisoner is being watched from the control room. We just don't think he could go out the front door. He certainly couldn't get past those pressure pads, and the guards in the towers, and the guards with the dogs, and over a massive fence that would cut him to pieces. All the time, everything is caught on CCTV. He would need a small army on the outside, and since the location is in the middle of nowhere, that army would be seen. Even if he employed some great hacker to hack the prison system and open the doors, he'd still have to face heavily armed guards. We can't see this happening outside of a Hollywood movie. But prisoners do have rights to see medical professionals, never mind how secure they are. This is the US law, so perhaps an escape could be made if El Chapo had to make a trip to a hospital. Possibly a catastrophic event, such as an earthquake or a fire, could result in an escape. But this is pretty unlikely. If prisoners were suddenly removed from their cells, they'd be shackled, so they wouldn't get anywhere fast. In conclusion, we think El Chapo will not be going anywhere. The bus grinds to a stop outside of the prison and crawls through the giant steel gates. The prisoner stares out of the window at the guard towers looming overhead, at the walls and fences glistening with coils of razor wire. He is tired after 4 hours of sitting on those hard seats and handcuffs and leg irons, but that is nothing compared to what's waiting inside. He's not just any inmate, he is branded, a convicted predator. And if the stories whispered in holding cells and courthouse corridors are true, justice inside these walls doesn't wait for the system. He will be dealt with in a way that befits a predator. Extortion, beatings, humiliation, maybe worse. The bus backs into the Sallyport and an officer tells everyone to get off in a single file line. Radios crackle as the new arrivals are herded like sheep into a waiting area, and it's there where an officer takes off his chains and cuffs. The officer sneers at the prisoner. These men are considered to be human garbage. But a predator is the worst of the worst. His mind is racing. He's thinking about what he'd read online, that for people like him an order might be given to kill on sight. If not death, then bullying is absolutely certain. He's never even had a real fight, so protecting himself is out of the question. His name is called when it's his turn to go to the counter where a woman is waiting. She casts a suspicious eye over him. He wonders if she knows what he's been convicted of. Maybe she doesn't care. To her, he could be one in a million, just another unremarkable man who's broken the law. This is the worst day of his life, and she is probably thinking about her coffee break. She takes his wallet and other belongings and slips them into a Ziploc bag. He'll get it back all when he's released. Someone will have to pick up his phone, she says. In 12 years, when he gets out, if he gets out, it'll be an antique. He tells her that he doesn't need it back. It's not like anyone on the outside speaks to him now. The only person who hasn't abandoned him is his brother, and he lives in another state. The couple of $100 he's brought with him will go into his prisoner trust account. There's also money for the telephone he'll be using a lot to fight his case, to overturn a conviction he believes is a grave injustice. But the fact is, in here it doesn't matter what he believes. Very soon, there will be a target on his back. He has to act fast. But how to survive in the meantime? The officer tells him to walk into another room. It's completely bare, just 4 white walls. He's told to strip. The prisoner hesitates, confusion etched onto his face. Both officers look at him like he's a first-class idiot. He removes his clothes, pausing at his boxer shorts, his face reddening with humiliation. The officer goes through the motions. Thank God they no longer do cavity searches. When it's over, he's handed some prison clothes, a pair of gray jogging pants and a white t-shirt. The officer passes him sheets and a pillow, a washcloth and some toiletries, and that's it. That is everything he owns now. It feels like being born again. A whole new world to navigate, a new culture and a language he'll have to learn. And then it's back to another holding room where he waits for hours. A processing officer eventually walks in and gives him a card with his prisoner number on it, 17657-089. If he's just been born again, this is his christening correctional style. They'll take a picture of him and get his fingerprints. Next up is orientation. He sits down with some other prisoners. Some barely listen to the officer, some look frightened, and some just look mean, just like those guys on the bus. He knows they couldn't possibly know what he's been accused of, but paranoia eclipses his every thought. The orientation guy explains how the commissary works, what to do if you feel ill or want to make a complaint. He tells them how to take a shower and go to the chow hall, how to mail letters and use the telephone. This is followed by a warning that in prison every move is recorded by CCTV. Don't for a second, the officer says, think we aren't watching you. Given the danger he's in, he doesn't mind surveillance at all. Bring on the surveillance, he is thinking, as his eyes dart around at some very scary-looking men. As the officer informs them what'll happen if they break the rules, one of the inmates laughs under his breath like the naughty kid at school who's heard it all before. With almost 2 million people locked up in jails, youth detention facilities, and prisons within the U.S., the laughing guy probably has heard it all. Around 66% of U.S. inmates will be back into prison within 3 years of being released. Not surprising when 60% are still unemployed after a year of freedom. The video they make the inmates watch fills the prisoner with a debilitating fear. A man on the TV screen says he was the victim of prison violence. He explains there's about a 1 in 10 or 20 chance of being assaulted in prison. You can tell an officer, the man says, but can you? Can you really? As the saying goes, snitches get stitches, even the ones who've been bullied and abused. He might be a newbie, but he knows this video is pointless. He'd read before he came here that there's a 1 to 41% chance an inmate will be victimized in some way or another in U.S. prison. As he looks around the room, he hopes that this is a 1% place. But the fact is, he is not a normal prisoner. Surely for him, he's in the 41% category, despite what he believes is his innocence. After about 2 hours of staring at the wall, he's ordered into an office. The guy behind a table says he's going to ask some questions, and it is of the utmost importance that the prisoner answers honestly. No, he tells the guy he's never been a cop or worked in the prison system. No, he isn't in a gang and he's never been affiliated with a gang. Well, not unless the Mickey Mouse Club counts. And no, he's never snitched on anyone in a criminal capacity. Then comes the question that he was hoping for. Do you believe it's conceivable that your life could be in danger if you are sent to the general population? This is the first time he answers yes. When he tries to tell the guy that there's been an injustice, he gets nothing back. That's a matter for the courts, not the prison, says the guy. He just tells him that he can choose to serve his time in the general population, but for his safety he can opt for something called protective custody, or PC. The prisoner already researched this option online. He's watched videos and TV shows about what prisoners think of predators. What's in his jacket, his case papers exposes information that would certainly put him at risk. If he chooses PC, it's as good as admitting his guilt. This is not an easy decision to make. He'll very much doubt that he'll be able to convince inmates in the general population that he's innocent. All that matters is what's in his papers. So it's either living with what inmates call chomos and abusers, or a rude introduction to the prison shiv. The guy starts listing privileges he won't receive in PC, and the fact that he'll spend most of his time in his cell. Regarding education and work opportunities, the guy says there might be options, but without doubt, much fewer than the general population. PC is by no means easy, the man says, and he has to be honest, with a conviction like his, general population will provide a clear and present danger. The guy is brutally honest, explaining that despite what was said in the orientation, inmates will have ample opportunities to launch an attack. There is literally no place to hide, and CCTV won't make a difference. He gives him a chance to think it over. In his mind, the prisoner is thinking about statistics again. Considering there are about 1.2 million inmates in federal and state prisons in the U.S., there aren't actually that many murders. From 2008 to 2016, the rate was between 40 and 80 murders a year, but then it slowly climbed toward 150. But what bothers him just as much is a study that said 4% of state and federal prisoners have experienced sexual victimization. PC might be the bottom floor of human nature, but he agrees to go there. His number is called, and an officer tells him it's time to go to the housing unit. Something that changed his mind about PC was when the guy said at this prison there's actually a full PC block. In some prisons, he explained PC is basically the whole, sometimes called special housing unit or administrative segregation, which means 23 hours a day in a cell. In this prison, they have PC programs. There's even yard time. That means more danger but less chance of losing your mind. So that's where he goes, walking through door after door as the menacing sound of bolts unlocking sends shivers down his spine. The officer stops and points to a door. He says, "Go inside and you'll come to a small desk. Behind it will be the unit officers." When he walks through the door, he's met by a large empty room surrounded by 3 levels of landings and cells. There is not a prisoner in sight, just an occasional shout from one of the cells. It's like a ghost prison. Nothing at all like he'd seen on TV. One of the officers leads him up a flight of stairs to the 2nd floor landing. Someone shouts "fish" from behind one of the doors. The officer opens a cell and nods his head for him to go inside. "Lights out at 9, he says, and breakfast is at 7:30 a.m. in the chow hall. That's another reason he chose PC. Here they even get to eat in the chow hall rather than get food through the door. There's a prison rule book inside the cell. The officer tells him to read and then slams the door shut. That's it. This is home. The bed is connected to the floor. There's a steel basin with a built-in toilet next to the door, a shelf in the corner, and a small steel table connected to the wall. A fluorescent light buzzes above him. In this cell, there is no natural daylight. That evening, he lies on the bed looking at the ceiling. He doesn't even have a book, never mind a TV. Everything smells like floor cleaner, but it's as if there is still grime covering everything. Even though the cell is clean, it still manages to feel dirty. He shuts his eyes, hoping for rest. It doesn't come. Images flash through his mind, strange faces, threats he hasn't met yet. What will morning bring? Who are the men he'll be living with? How does anyone survive this? He remembers the stat that he read before sentencing. 63% of inmates in state prisons are locked up for violent crimes. That number has never felt more real. From down the hall, someone screams, loud and desperate. Then, more shouting. He squeezes his eyes tighter, trying to block it out. The next 12 years will be hell. When he hears doors unlocking in the morning, he has no idea what time it is. Without natural daylight or a watch, how would he know? All he knows is it's time for breakfast. He's taken down to the bottom floor and joins a line. Single file, the officer says, and don't step forward or backward. The line is slowly marched forward with officers at each side. It takes ages to do anything here, which he guesses is why some prisons don't have a PC block. It's just too much work. One by one, the men enter the chow hall door and grab a tray. Some of them are already sitting at tables and eating and have tattooed faces. They look tough, like street guys. But some, the only way to describe them is just creepy. They shuffle around with their heads down, looking like the dregs of society people say they are. The prisoner is handed his food, and it looks inedible. 2 boiled eggs, which is fine, but that oatmeal looks like it came straight out of a cow. 2 slices of white bread accompany a mystery meat sausage, and then there's an apple. It's no wonder it only costs prisons anywhere from $2 to $8 a day for all 3 meals. The prisoner finds an empty table. He keeps his head down, attempting to eat the oatmeal. Suddenly, a tattooed inmate sits beside him. He introduces himself as Nasty and gives the prisoner the lowdown. Most guys in here are predators, Nasty says, but not all. Some are former gang members, some are snitches. Nasty says he knew instantly that he wasn't a predator. Thank God, he thinks, someone who still understands. Nasty motions over into the corner, where a huge, muscular, mean-looking guy is eating alone. Nasty explains that he was forced into PC to put some work in for the Mexican mafia. In other words, he's here to kill, or at least seriously hurt a chomo. And unfortunately, Nasty has it on good authority that it could be the prisoner. Nasty just says it's part of the culture here to get the fish, the new guy. It was a lottery and he lost. If men get beaten or killed at the start of their sentence, he says, it sends a stronger message. The message is part of the prison code. Predators will not be tolerated. So now the gangs infiltrate PC with torpedoes, hitmen, or guys who carry out assaults. But Nasty says not to worry. He has a plan and he'll protect him. Later, when they get to use the phones, Nasty says he should get someone to put $400 in an account. He gives them the details. That'll be enough to get the green light taken off. Nasty explains that this comes at a considerable risk to himself, but he'll do it because he hates bullying in prison. The prisoner feels lucky to have put into a cell next to such a thoughtful and moral man, not the type of inmate he was expecting to meet. That afternoon, after a lunch of bologna and stale white bread, he receives a list of books that he can order from the library. The problem is, because of the crime that he's been convicted of, he is not allowed to read any kind of material that could excite him. That means just about every novel that's ever been written. There is a list of approved books. He picks one at random and hopes for the best. About an hour later, he gets 20 minutes on the phone. The prisoner tries to tell his brother about the PC's Kill the Fish lottery and the small payment that he needs to make to a fine gentleman who's helping him turn off the green light. Just $400, it's a bargain. He explains to his brother that he wouldn't understand the intricacies of prison code, only the cons would get it, so just send the cash. Time's up, $10.50. Evidently, prisons and thieves have something in common. Later that day, when the men go into the yard, he sees something he really wasn't expecting. Nasty and the Mexican guy are standing there, chatting near the bench press. Both look his way and start laughing, executing what looks like a complicated gang dap handshake. The prisoner doesn't approach out of fear, keeping his distance until another inmate walks up and introduces himself as Kevin. Kevin notices his gaze drifting toward two other prisoners. The Mexican, Kevin explains, is Chico. He's been placed in protective custody because his release is near and he doesn't want any trouble jeopardizing his freedom. According to Kevin, in prison it's dangerous to let others know you're getting out soon. Jealousy runs deep, and some inmates will go out of their way to sabotage your plans. Many inmates in protective custody are just trying to make it to their release without incident. The prisoner tells Kevin about the fish lottery, but Kevin quickly dismisses that, saying the prisoner has been scammed. Nasty just ripped off so many people that he was a dead man if he stayed in the general population. There was a target on his back. Even now in protective custody, the threat remained. But among the cholos housed in PC, it was unlikely anyone would act on it. The rest of the inmates just wanted to serve their time and get out. It seems the monsters and predators in PC come in different shapes and sizes. The prisoner has a lot to learn in the next 12 years.
So you and your crack team of convicts have come up with the most brilliant escape plan ever. You've spent weeks making a tunnel with nothing but spoons you've had smuggled into the prison, and you've got dummies that look just like you, which you'll put in your bed while you're busy crawling through your escape tunnel. Yep, you've heard that story before, because it's actually been done. The problem with escaping from prison is getting out is just the beginning. Staying out is actually the hard part. It's not exactly easy to leave a prison and then just mingle with the local population, and the reason for that is, of course, you might not have any civilian clothes. We're going to focus on the USA today because that's where the black and white stripes were first worn. In fact, if you look at many prisons around the world today, inmates can wear what you might call normal clothing, often a t-shirt and jogging pants or something similar. The rigid rules about what men have to wear in American prisons is actually quite unique. You might wonder why the USA is special in this regard, and the topic is actually quite controversial. We'll get to that controversy later, and first give you a short history lesson. So the black and white stripes came into being during something called the Auburn system. The system was developed in the 1820s in New York State, and it was supposed to be an improvement on other prison systems. What it basically meant was that prisoners were no longer confined to their cells all the time, and they were told they had to work throughout the day. During the night, they had to stay in their cells, but the catch was they had to remain silent. The guards were very strict about this, and it drove some of the prisoners half crazy. The system was supposed to rehabilitate people rather than just let them rot. The rules were incredibly strict, and that was supposed to make the men more disciplined, something that might change their unruly behavior. Not only did they have to remain silent at night, but when they walked in the day, they marched in single file, locked to the prisoner in front of them. When they marched in the daytime, they were neither allowed to look at the guards or even at other prisoners. If that sounds dehumanizing, that's exactly what it was supposed to be. The system was all about making the men conform to rules, and so another thing they had to conform to was wearing the correct uniform. That uniform was the famous black and white stripes. The governor of Auburn Prison at the time said he wanted to take away the men's sense of self. He wanted them to become more like robots, men who did exactly what they were told. He wanted to take their identity away from them and re-educate them. This was why they all had to look the same. So while the uniform was supposed to make the men stand out if they should escape, it was also about trying to rid them of their character, a character that was seen as criminal. We should also point out that this was around the time that whipping or flogging a prisoner was seen as inhumane, so the system wanted to beat the men psychologically. In the 20th century, attitudes started to change, and the dehumanization of prisoners was viewed by some more progressive people as not the best way to treat a prisoner. They saw those stripes as humiliating, something you might call a badge of shame. Those progressives said the uniforms only served to make the men feel like convicts, and that was hardly in line with rehabilitation. That's why a lot of prisons then changed and had prisoners wear things such as blue jeans and a white t-shirt, or maybe khaki pants and a denim work shirt. It all depended on where a person was imprisoned. Okay, so why did the orange jumpsuit take over many US prisons? And that's a good question. Thanks for asking. It's a complicated answer because some prisons don't make men wear orange and others do. In some facilities, the prisoners will only don those orange suits when they're out in public or being moved around. The reason, of course, is so they stand out. Some prisons might make men and women wear pink shirts and yellow and white striped pants, and again, the reason is so they stand out. Sheriff Joseph Arpaio of Maricopa County, Arizona, who's detested by some progressives and loved by hardliners, has made men wear pink underwear to humiliate them, and he's also had men wear black and white stripes. That sheriff adheres to the old concept that men should be dehumanized. He also went a step further, as he usually does, and got inmates to write "escapee" on the inside of their black and white striped uniforms, so if they escaped, they couldn't turn the uniforms inside out. In the American system, you've also got color codes which designate what kind of prisoner is locked up. In some prisons, if a person wears dark red, he's designated as the worst of the worst, a violent individual who should be feared. You might have red as a designation of just high risk, and you might have yellow as a designation of low risk. So the black and white stripes went out and the orange came in, along with all kinds of other colors. But then something strange happened in the early 2000s, and that was prisons all over the US started bringing back the black and white stripes. So what was the reason for that? The problem, according to some authorities, was that if prisoners in jumpsuits escaped, they might blend in on the outside with workmen or highway workers or any other law-abiding citizen that just wears a jumpsuit to work. The zebra look made a comeback, even though many years earlier that look was said to be too dehumanizing. Does this mean the system is in a state of regression and actually becoming more inhumane? Well, that's an ongoing argument. One sheriff interviewed by the New York Times said it was not about humiliating prisoners with a badge of shame, but just about preventing them from successfully escaping. He said this: "The likelihood of recovering someone in stripes is 100% better than if they're not. It turns the public into one heck of an eye for us." Actually, prison escapes in the US are very rare. If you look at the statistics, they're a bit misleading because they include prisoners who are allowed outside during the day and then have to check back in at night. Some of those guys just fail to check back in. This is more like going AWOL. Maximum security breakouts are so rare these days that one researcher said it was hard to research them. Out of the 2.3 million or so incarcerated people in the USA, very few of them escape. And we mean hardly any at all. Even if men do escape, they usually have some help on the outside and can quickly take off that uniform and change into civilian clothes. So, with that in mind, you could say the uniform is related to that badge of shame as well as being an escape deterrent. And some people might say the uniformity of prison dress makes the prisoner more manageable and he should be stripped of his dignity. Others would counter, saying the badge of disgrace is not effective in terms of rehabilitating someone. Soldiers or some school kids might wear a uniform, but this is supposed to bring people together. It's for the purpose of a common cause and to foster cohesion, working for the same team. But the question is, does prison uniform create kind of criminal cohesion? Is that really necessary or even negative? In 1955, the United Nations came out with the standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners, and that was later revised as the Mandela Rules in 2015. This is one part of those rules. Every prisoner who is not allowed to wear his or her own clothing shall be provided with an outfit of clothing suitable for the climate and adequate to keep him or her in good health. Such clothing shall in no manner be degrading or humiliating. And this is another part. In exceptional circumstances, whenever a prisoner is removed outside the prison for an authorized purpose, he or she shall be allowed to wear his or her own clothing or other inconspicuous clothing. It seems in the US some states are more concerned with following these rules than others, and maybe it's a matter of opinion if pink underwear or black and white stripes are degrading or humiliating. Maybe you believe an orange jumpsuit doesn't have to be worn when a prisoner is being transported, or maybe you think it's necessary. In some countries, prisoners are still shackled when they have a court date or are moved. So don't think every nation follows these Mandela rules. Like we said at the start, it's a controversial hot potato of a topic, and it's not easy to come to a conclusion as to what is right and what's wrong.
There seems to be some disagreement as to who has spent the most time in solitary confinement. But you can find a handful of people that did over 40 years without much contact with other people. The record might well be smashed by the British prisoner called Robert Maudsley, aka the Brain Eater, or the real-life Hannibal the Cannibal, who's now done over 40 years in solitary. The man we're going to talk about today might be behind in terms of years spent kept away from the other prison population, but there's another reason he's called the most isolated prisoner in the world. Mr. Silverstein, who was born in 1952, has been in prison since 1977. Back then, he was convicted of armed robbery and sent to the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas to do his time. You might be curious why armed robbery with no deaths would warrant such a long sentence, but it's what Tommy did inside the prison that made the difference. He has been given the epithet America's most dangerous prisoner, and while the media is prone to exaggeration at times, he certainly has been very dangerous within the confines of U.S. prisons. During his time behind bars, he's been convicted of killing 4 people, although one of those convictions was overturned. For that, he was later given a specially designed solitary cell, and one that he would have to spend 24 hours a day in 7 days a week. According to blog posts written not long before we started writing this show, Silverstein had some very serious health complications, but we're told that the Bureau of Prisons will not release any information as to his condition. He was put into intensive care, although we're told not even his family were allowed to visit him. This is how isolated this prisoner is, and we should add that by the time you watch this show, there might not even be a Tommy Silverstein. But now let's look at how he got into this point in his life. We're told that Tommy grew up in Long Beach, California. While pregnant with him, his mother got a divorce, though she then married again. Silverstein claims that the second man is his real father. He wasn't around that long anyway because his mother divorced again and married a Mr. Silverstein, and this man legally adopted the young Tommy. From what we can see, he didn't exactly come from the wrong side of the tracks. It's said he lived a middle-class kind of life, but was very shy and certainly not a tough kid at the start. He was bullied for various reasons, but it's written that because of his name, the other kids used to pick on him for being Jewish in a neighborhood where there weren't many Jewish people. It's said he soon toughened up and fought back, with Silverstein saying his mother didn't suffer fools or bullies gladly. Most bio websites post this comment that Silverstein once made about his childhood. "That's how my mom was. She stood her mud. If someone came at you with a bat, you got your bat and you both went at it." So it seems he was a slightly troubled kid, but he didn't get into serious trouble until he was 19 years old. That's when he was arrested for armed robbery the first time. He was sent to San Quentin and served 4 years. Not long after getting out, he met his father, the real one that he says is his biological father, and also his uncle. The 3 were eventually arrested for 3 armed robberies. It seemed Silverstein, being so young, garnered some sympathy, with those people saying the young man had been taken in by the older men. The judge wasn't buying any of that lack of parental guidance stuff though, and sentenced Tommy to 15 years. He wouldn't get out of prison again and might never if his present sickness gets the better of him. Even if he survives that, it's very unlikely he'll ever get out of prison again. It's said his release date is officially 2095, so if he makes it to 143, he might feel the wind on his back again. While in prison in Kansas, he developed a friendship with members of the Aryan Brotherhood. In 1980, Tommy, now 28, was convicted of killing a fellow inmate. The story goes that the inmate had turned down an offer he couldn't refuse. That was to be a drug mule for the white gang. This is what the TV show Crime Investigation had to say. As an inductee of the Aryan Brotherhood, Terrible Tom happily committed acts of violence, which soon escalated to murder. He violently killed DC Black's gang member Danny Atwell. We should say, though, that his conviction was overturned, with some of the witnesses later charged with lying in court. Silverstein was then sent to the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, which was said to be a very tough prison. Silverstein had been given a life sentence for that murder, but obviously that had been reversed after the perjury charge. But then he was accused of killing another DC Blacks member, Robert Chappelle. Silverstein always denied this, and then the Bureau of Prisons did something one could call worthy of redress. They moved the nationwide leader of the DC Blacks, Raymond Cadillac Smith, to Marion while Silverstein was on trial for Chappelle's murder. "I tried to tell Cadillac that I didn't kill Chappelle, but he didn't believe me and he bragged that he was going to kill me," Silverstein would later say. He added that no one tried to keep the men apart, and it was believed by him and the other prisoners that the guards wanted one of the men to kill the other. A more cynical person would say that the system wanted one less violent inmate. The one less they eventually got was Cadillac, who was stabbed 67 times by Silverstein. He did this with another member of the Aryan Brotherhood called Clayton Fountain. Crime Investigation writes that Silverstein walked up and down the wing with the dead body to show the others what might happen if they decided to try and take him out. We're told after this he became one of the top guys in the Aryan Brotherhood. He was also given another life sentence. So now we bring in an officer called Merle Eugene Klutz. He was supposed to maintain order in the violent wing of the prison, but Silverstein has always maintained that Klutz came in with a very heavy hand. He was there to especially watch Silverstein, and the latter said that he didn't only watch him, but regularly tormented him. That culminated with the death of Klutz. One day in 1983, he and other guards were taking Silverstein to the shower block. On the way, with the help of another prisoner, Silverstein got out of his handcuffs with a homemade key and stabbed the officer with a shank or a homemade weapon that he'd been handed. The autopsy report revealed that Silverstein stabbed Klutz around 40 times. Silverstein has always said he did this because Klutz had treated him particularly badly, even for prison. An investigation revealed that wasn't the case, but Silverstein said the investigation itself was corrupt. He was transferred to a different prison at this time, where he murdered another guard. What followed was a 23-year lockdown at Marion. Some say these two incidents were the reason the first Supermax prison was built in the US. You might guess that this was the beginning of Silverstein's days in solitary. It wasn't normal solitary though. It was what's called total isolation. That means 24 hours a day in the cell and lights are on all the time. His security status was no human contact. Not many prisoners get this, with Silverstein and the British maniac we mentioned at the start of the show being the most notorious. Advocates of human rights have said such isolation is not far from a torture technique used by the military and sometimes extremists called whitewashing. Gradually, the BOP started giving Silverstein books and a TV. But skeptics say this only happened because the Bureau realized that in order to really punish someone in prison, the prisoner can't just have nothing. You need to give him something and then take it away. This is the Torture 101 style we see in the movies, such as Silence of the Lambs when Dr. Lecter has his books taken away. We should add that his self-contained cell is a bit bigger than usual cells. For one thing, it has to have a shower as he can't go to the shower room. We've seen plenty of sketches online that Tommy himself drew of his cell. We might also add that Silverstein didn't hate all guards. In a now famous case, one part of a prison was overtaken by Cuban rioters in 1987. Silverstein was let out of his cell, and he could go anywhere he liked for a short time. The Cubans held guards hostage, and so the authorities were concerned that Silverstein would hurt or even kill them. One of the guards had known Silverstein for a long time, but no bad came to him. It said he had always been kind to the prisoner, asking him on occasions if his handcuffs were too tight. Still, Silverstein said some of the guards would torment him often. In fact, you can read a blog that includes a note written by Silverstein that must have been written just before he fell ill. There he talks about deprivation, saying, "Dear friends and supporters, as I've noted for decades with each new warden administration, that they rotate every 3 years or so, usually takes away from what we've got instead of gives us more." He adds, "They gotta flex their muscles as cowards do with the hopeless and helpless." In the last paragraph, he talks about what his solitary confinement is like, saying, "Like the monotone bars and walls that entomb me, they've stamped out the colors of happiness that I enjoy sharing with the outside world, enforcing a black and white existence in this colorless hole of madness." Other blog posts written by friends of Silverstein tell us that his writing and art have been confiscated at times, and getting anything creative out of prison has been hard. We found a lot more of Tommy's thoughts that have been published on blogs. He writes in other posts that, unlike even the worst case of confinement, he can't even shout across a corridor. His isolation is what you might call extreme solitude. He writes that things have happened to him that have never been reported, and he adds that inside the prison walls things go on that seldom make it onto those prison TV shows. For him, the penal system is unjust. The prison system in general is not about rehabilitation for the most part, he believes. As for solitary, he writes, "History and studies clearly show that solitary confinement does more harm than good, that it reveals the idiocy and sadistic mentality of prison administrators who embrace this barbaric medieval practice, and that it is a crime against humanity." The guards didn't see it that way, with one prison official once telling an author, "We can't execute Silverstein, so we have no choice but to make his life a living hell. Otherwise, inmates will kill guards too. There has to be some supreme punishment." We should add that Silverstein does get to visit people now and again, but never in close quarters and always with glass and a telephone. One visitor recently wrote, he was told there were certain things he was not allowed to discuss with me, one being the book he is writing. Tom talked about his desire to further his education. I had no idea there's no longer funding for prisoners to study.
Your flight takes off. As it climbs into the rising sun, you wonder, is the in-flight meal chicken or fish? But guess what? It doesn't matter. You're not actually on the flight. No, you're on a new journey, a different kind of trip. You did the crime, and now it's time to do the time in Japanese prison. Now as you're led down the hallway to your new home for the next 2 years, fear sets in. Japan's prison system operates on strict rules and a vastly different culture than the US, and you have no idea what's in store. Is this going to be one of those nightmare scenarios of an American in a foreign jail, or could it actually be as nice and clean as the hotel you stayed in? It's time to experience your first 24 hours in a Japanese prison on this episode of the Infographics Show. Okay, so ignoring those customs instructions might not have been your best move. Let's just say your attempts to bring a few souvenirs back from visiting family in Japan didn't go unnoticed. It was probably the Japanese flying squirrels in your suitcase that raised a few eyebrows. But hey, your girlfriend wanted a real souvenir, and plushies just weren't cutting it. Turns out trying to be a good boyfriend doesn't fly in court. Now you're headed up the river. American citizens arrested abroad often get a hand from their government. But Japan has a justice system with a solid reputation, so don't expect a diplomatic rescue. Besides, you definitely, absolutely did it. You have no idea what to expect. Well, that's not quite true. Unlike the American prison system, the Japanese penal system is very strictly regulated and overseen. Japanese pretrial detention is fairly fast-paced and efficient. Suspects are detained for up to 48 hours unless an extension is requested. You pled guilty because they pretty much caught you dead to rights smuggling, and you were hoping for leniency. But the judge wasn't feeling it that day. It was all over pretty quickly, and your fate was determined. And then it was off to school. One of the most unique elements of the Japanese prison system is that before you go, you're placed in an orientation program that lasts 15 days. During this time, you're not in the general population, and you spend most of your time being briefed on the rules and the schedule of your new life. It feels more like a military academy than a prison so far, but you're worried that that's about to change. And that's because you're headed to one of the most infamous and largest penitentiaries in Japan, Fuchu Prison. Most of the inmates here are in for the long haul, 10 years or more. You quickly realize you're one of the few serving a relatively light sentence. But that doesn't make things any easier in a place like this. As you're escorted out of the orientation quarters and led toward the general population in Fuchu Prison, you're immediately struck by the sheer scale of the place. With over 1,200 inmates and a capacity of more than 2,700, this facility is packed. And you're just one face among the almost 60 nationalities housed here, many of which have past prison records. When you first came in, you went through a search, but now it's time for round 2. A much more intense search to ensure you're not bringing in any well-hidden contraband. This time, the Japanese guards conduct the search with a precision that feels almost rehearsed. Bend over and cough. This isn't your first time in a holding cell, so it's not your first time getting a full search. The Japanese guards seem more in control of the situation than the American guards did when they caught you joyriding in your dad's truck. They gave you clear instructions and they didn't have to make threats. But from the steely look in their eyes, you get the distinct impression that you had better obey very carefully. You've already given up your possessions at intake, and you'll get them back when you're released. Well, except for the squirrels. So now it's time to meet the company. You watched plenty of prison dramas over the years, so you're expecting the worst. Will they be chanting "new fish" in Japanese? You saw some of your fellow new prisoners in the orientation, but there was no chance for interaction. Silence was required all around. You don't know whether they're ordinary schlubs like you or hardened criminals. As you're led down the hallway to your cell, you wait for outbursts of violence and threats, but they don't come. In fact, the entire place is a little too quiet for your tastes. But you're going to be getting a lot of company very soon. The biggest shock you get is when you arrive at your cell. This isn't a standard cell with bars and 2 cots for you and your cellie to bicker over. Rather, it's a stark room that looks more like a ward in a mental hospital or a military barracks. And the other big surprise is how many people are in it. 6. Most prisoners in Japan are held in communal cells, although high-risk and some foreign prisoners are held separately. As you're a non-violent prisoner without any political complications to your case, and you speak Japanese, you suppose they decided you're suitable for the general population. You look around and your roommates look like a combination of Japanese prisoners and foreign ones. Prisons in Japan are far more segregated than prisons in the US and many other countries. That means you're not going to be housed with the most hardcore prisoners. They're gathered by the type of penalty, the length of sentence, and how dangerous they're seen as to the guards and other prisoners. And that means You're likely to be housed with other non-violent criminals, many of whom are first-time offenders. And from a look at the faces around you, they've all been through this procedure a few times before. Haruto has wound up here for a 10-year stint due to a series of high-value robberies. Kenji was involved with a gang riot as a young man and is more than halfway through a 6-year sentence. Akihiko is the oldest inmate here and was caught running an elaborate insider trading ring and is serving 5 years. Daichi was on the lookout for his older brother during an armed robbery and got 4 years after cooperating with the police. And Jurgen is a German tourist whose vacation in Japan was extended by 7 years after being caught with drugs. It's kinda like a camp bunk, only a lot more miserable. So you puff up your chest and say, "Yeah, I was caught in a smuggling ring. Got 2 years." They don't need to know about the squirrels. Now you all know each other's crimes and they all seem fine, but a part of you is still worried. There isn't a lot of space here and you're sure you're gonna get on each other's nerves. You remember sharing a bedroom with 5 cousins at Christmas. It was a total brawl within hours. How long until this place turns into a Japanese smackdown tournament? Months, weeks, or maybe you're already in it. People do step out of line in Japanese prisons, and they usually regret it. In American prisons, the guards feel omnipresent. You remember being woken up by them banging their nightsticks on the bars. Felt like they wanted someone to screw up so they could make an example of them. But here they almost blend into the background, and that's because good behavior is expected here. They drilled this into you repeatedly during orientation. The prison runs on a military-style system of discipline, with everyone wearing the same uniform and following a very strict schedule. And like in the military, you rise together or you fall together. The reason Japanese prisons house inmates together is because, to a large degree, the discipline here is enforced not by the guards, but by fellow inmates. If one inmate steps out of line, the whole cell could lose privileges, so it is fairly common for the 5 inmates who aren't plotting anything to report misbehavior. Or it might be quicker to intimidate their wayward roommate back into the straight and narrow. So, in some ways, you don't have 5 roommates, you have 5 more experienced guards who are not going to let you pull any funny business. But you might not have the time for funny business. One of the biggest culture shocks about Japanese prison is that everything is structured down to the minute. While in American prison, boredom was your biggest enemy. Your cellmate didn't like it when you started whistling your favorite songs from The Simpsons. Here, you're going to be kept very busy. It starts only a short time after you've been brought to your cell for the first time and met your roommates. Only a few minutes later, a guard is knocking on your cell door and everyone inside snaps to attention. It's time for roll call. The guards briskly take notes that everyone is here, dressed, and ready for their day to begin. Everyone quickly snaps to attention, and even though it takes you a few more seconds, it's not noticed. You're led down the hall because it's chow time. As a foreign prisoner in Japan, you had a few choices to make, including your diet inside. Foreign prisoners are given the choice of a rice-based diet or a bread-based diet more suited to Western tastes. Vegetarian and halal options are also available, but this is a one-way choice. No switching later on, except in extenuating circumstances. You actually chose to have the standard diet because you didn't know about the quality of special requests. And this is another surprise right out of the gate. It's not terrible. Japanese prisons are controversial for a lot of reasons, but the food is not one of them. They're actually considered to have one of the best prison diets in the world, certainly better than the United States. Meals are carefully designed for suitable nutrition and calorie needs and have a good variety. It's not always pleasure. For breakfast, you're served a simple meal of rice, fish, and pickled vegetables. It certainly is the furthest thing from the McGriddle you're craving right now, but it does the job. And it had better because it's work time. You won't have time to get bored in Japanese prison because you'll be busy doing your new job. What's that? Whatever the prison sees fit. While prison labor is common across the world, including in the US, it serves 2 purposes in Japan. The goal is to keep the inmates occupied, teach them useful skills, and produce goods. Some of the common trades taught in prison include auto repair, carpentry, woodworking, leather work, typography, and dry cleaning. These are in-house assignments, although inmates who are serving longer sentences and have had time to build trust may be outsourced to factories to complete their labor. And it is not optional. While you're locked up, you'll be working a full 8-hour day in prison, and for your initial assignment, you'll be in woodworking. You're given a quick tutorial on the patterns you'll be making, as well as the machine you'll be using. Seems easy enough to master, and you'll be doing it a lot. You get confused a few times and have some pieces have to be thrown away, but you figure you shouldn't be asking for any help. Everyone here looks pretty plugged in. It's been a long day. At least it's already 9 a.m. At 9:45, it's time for a quick break. You're able to get something to drink, stretch your legs, and relax all under the watchful eye of your guards. Before you know it, the signal rings again, and it's back to work. This is the second part of your shift, and you'll be working until noon. It's boring work, but it's manageable. But one of the most surprising parts of it is how utterly quiet it was. When you were doing work in detail during one of your stays in Juvie Hall, the kids were constantly chatting and arguing. The shouts of "back to work" by the guards were even louder. Not here. Everyone is working in unison, barely making a peep. And after what feels like forever, it's time for another break. You're headed for lunch, and you're actually a little excited by what awaits you. You're getting the impression that food might be one of the few highlights of your time here. Think of it as your own Japanese restaurant experience. If you couldn't leave and the chef just picked out whatever looked interesting that day. Your hands are starting to ache after the first part of your shift, and you could use the energy. It's a simple plate of teriyaki chicken and a mildly sweet sauce with some grilled vegetables and more rice. It's enjoyable enough, but you're starting to miss a Philly cheesesteak. However, you suspect that that was not one of the offerings on the bread-based menu. From there, it's time to return to work, but you're in for a surprise. As it's your first day and your responses to quizzes about your aptitude in orientation was, I don't know, the management's decided to switch you around. You suspect that your reaction time in woodworking was a little too slow, so they decided to switch you into auto repair, where you'll be working with a team. Your job here is more familiar. You've changed plenty of tires in your day, and your assembly line is soon a well-oiled machine. Under the watchful eye of the guards, of course, you have a feeling you'll be fine here, because you'll be doing this a lot. You were briefed by your duties in orientation, and this is essentially a full-time job. You'll be working 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and 4 hours on Saturday. For this, you'll be paid a mighty sum of around $30 a month, which will be held in escrow for you. Hey, at least it's something, and you're not paying for room and board. In many ways, it hasn't really sunk in for you that you're in prison. You haven't spent much time in a cell, and you're being kept busy. Your cellmates seem okay too. And now it's time for dinner. There's a sense of novelty to what you're getting from this different culture. Dinner fits into a similar pattern. It's a pork katsu cutlet, which is kind of like a schnitzel with a lighter breading, with steamed vegetables and of course a decent portion of rice. It tastes good, but you get the feeling that you're going to become very familiar with these dishes over the next 2 years. They're all designed to give you a combo of major food groups suited to the Japanese diet, and there is a reason they call it a rice-based diet. Now it's time for what you've been looking forward to all day, some time off. Your work detail is done for the day, so you return to your cell. For well-behaved inmates, this is the one time of the day when some brief tastes of comfort and relaxation are allowed. Unlike in American prisons, there isn't much emphasis on outdoor exercise. After all, you've been working for most of the day, so instead this is essentially quiet time. Inmates have access to television and radio during this period, assuming they can agree what to watch or listen to. You're letting your cellmates pick this time. You don't want to make any waves. Besides, you got your own entertainment. Before being officially taken in, you're given the chance to select up to 10 books for entertainment. You managed to get most of your picks, though a few were vetoed and for being a bit too spicy for prison standards. Turns out the prison has a strict ban on anything deemed pornographic or detrimental to public morale. You're also briefed on some upcoming enrichment activities, from group exercise hours to motivational talks on bouncing back after prison. One thing is clear, the prison is designed to rehabilitate you, or at least that's the plan. And you're going to learn stuff whether you like it or not. There are a few catches to your recreation here, like the fact that everything has to be done in Japanese. You're really lucky that you listened to your mom's Japanese lessons growing up, although some accommodations are allowed for foreign prisoners who are in their own units. You see, Jurgen has books in German, although he seems to know enough Japanese to converse with the other inmates. Now to settle in and unwind from a long and confusing first day in prison. Well, at least you would if it wasn't for the shouting from down the hall. You sit up with a start and watch as a young Japanese man is roughly dragged down the hall by several guards, struggling to get free. The illusion of order has been shattered, but none of your fellow inmates look startled. Daichi just mutters under his breath, "Looks like another couldn't handle it," and everyone else nods. You get the feeling that they've all had their own brushes with the guards, well, except for maybe Akihiko, who looks like he really wants to get back to his corner office. But the younger inmates can tell you don't know what awaits the unfortunate inmate, and they can't wait to tell you. It's scary story time. The thing about Japanese prison is it's peaceful and tightly regimented. There is plenty of opportunities for growth and learning if you keep to the straight and narrow. The second you veer from the schedule, the system comes down on you like a ton of bricks. For inmates who disrupt the order, punishment often means solitary confinement in a protection cell, supposedly for those posing a risk to themselves or others. This typically involves heavy restraints, handcuffs, and intense isolation. Multiple organizations have raised concerns that Japan's reliance on such extreme measures to keep order may be edging into civil rights violations. And you might be one of the lucky ones. Daichi hasn't had much interaction with his brother since the older robber got 15 years. But what communication he had with him indicates that you guys have it easy. Violent criminals are definitely not treated with kid gloves in Japan. Time out of the cell is much more limited, routine is more strictly regimented, and high-security inmates are often heavily isolated. For death row cases, the inmates live in near total isolation and don't even know when their execution will be. You picked up that little detail from an episode of your favorite YouTube channel. Maybe it should have given you a hint to stay out of prison here. And you really don't want to wind up having a close encounter with the guards of your own. You hear a slam of a door down the hall, and you know you probably won't be hearing from that one inmate for a little while. If he pulls himself together, he'll probably be back on the main floor soon enough. If not, he could find himself upgraded to a higher level of security full-time. Suddenly your cell feels a little smaller, and the book that you've been reading no longer holds much interest. This is the first time you've had all day to really be alone with your thoughts, and your situation is weighing on you. Your first day in a Japanese prison is just about over, and the next one will likely be almost exactly the same. Routine is king in Japanese prison, and for those who want to get through their sentence, it's best to learn the routine fast. Now, you've just got to do this about 729 more times. That's a whole lot of rice. The metal pipe gave off a dull thwack sound as it slammed into the back of the man's skull, sending a crimson spray into the air. The crowd erupted, their cheers fueling the brutal assault. Instead of backing away, they surged forward, boxing in the staggering victim and almost shoving him back toward his attacker. The second blow came faster, smashing into the man's face, shattering teeth with an audible crunch. A sharp clap of hands sliced through the chaos, silencing the frenzied crowd. The air grew heavy. The only sounds were the labored, wet wheezing of the victim, struggling for each breath, and the ragged panting of his exhausted attackers. The crowd parted, and a man stepped into the makeshift ring they had formed. His eyes swept across the scene, locking on the man clutching the bloodied pipe. With a subtle nod, the man jerked his head over in the direction of the dirty pool of water sitting in the cracked concrete center of the plaza. The crowd exploded in a fresh roar. Their bloodlust reignited as the broken, bloodied man was dragged to the pool's edge. With a final heave, they hurled him into the murky water. His desperate gasps turned to frantic gurgles as two pairs of strong hands held him down. The man's body convulsed violently, his legs kicking in a frenzied rhythm that slowed as the fight left him. Then he fell still. The ripples on the water's surface the only sign of the violence moments before. This was prison life in Bolivia, and the act wasn't carried out on some secret, shadowy corner of the facility. It was done in broad daylight, and there wasn't a single cop in sight. Rough hands yank you from the back of the police van, your body stumbling forward as your boots scrape against the pavement. Blinking against the sudden glare of daylight, it takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. You're surprised to discover yourself in the middle of one of the most upper-class neighborhoods in all of La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. An enigma of a city, the vast metropolis straddles several peaks of the Andes Mountains. In most cities, the wealthy pay millions for the luxury of sprawling high-rise homes with commanding views from the mountainsides. But in La Paz, the roles are reversed. It's the poor who are forced to live high up, crammed into tiny tenements of dubious construction. The wealthy cling to their land the ancestors once claimed. Fertile river valleys transformed into an affluent concrete jungle. Surrounding the sanctuary of luxury is a sprawling ring of poverty, where some of the world's poorest people scrape by. And the dubious crowning jewel of upper-class life in La Paz is San Pedro Prison, situated in the heart of one of the best neighborhoods in the entire city. The police shove you forward as you take in the view. Behind you are modern, expensive apartments and condos, but directly in front of you looms a massive wall, towering 60 feet high. Coils of rusting barbed wire stretch across it, while defunct and long-abandoned guard posts sit at each corner of the sprawling prison compound.
Beyond those walls is a society of 3,000 inmates where every aspect of life is run by a civilization built by the most violent of Bolivia's criminal offenders. There are several entry points into the prison, but 3 of them are almost always permanently locked and only used for emergency purposes. But in the past, those same doors served another purpose. For the right fee and with the right cop at your side, they become discreet gateways for smuggling people in. This led to the prison having a booming tourist trade, with foreign tourists paying to stay a few days inside of Bolivia's most dangerous prison. Because now almost all traffic comes in through the front gates, the 4 cops permanently stationed there don't care about who goes in anymore, only who comes out. In broad daylight, you get pushed by armed police past a crowd made up of family members, visitors, and prostitutes. The receiving guards roughly pull you into a small office where they finish your paperwork. It only takes a matter of minutes, though there are some hang-up when they see that you're not a Bolivian citizen. It's only a brief hiccup, though. The American embassy already knows you were charged with a crime and sentenced to a year in San Pedro. Thankfully, the ambassador is trying to negotiate moving you to an American facility in the States to serve your time. But for now, you're stuck here. Once the paperwork is complete, you're surprised to find no prison uniform handed to you. Instead, you're given a brief pat-down. Your wallet remains untouched in your pocket, the officers barely sparing it a glance. The entire process feels more customary than anything else. The 4 cops manning the gate to San Pedro aren't concerned about what you're bringing into the prison as long as it stays inside of the prison. That is the official policy of the Bolivian state, who long ago gave up on the prison and instead left it to the inmates to run themselves. Low on cash, the move was publicized as a progressive prison experience, where inmates would be forced to care for each other and thus reform themselves. In truth, it's just that Bolivia simply can't afford to take care of the most populated prison in the entire country. Inside, it is anarchy, a lawless state within the heart of the Bolivian capital, and the police's jurisdiction starts and stops at the front gate. As it swings open and you are ushered in, the police officer doesn't follow. Instead, he gives you a push forward and quickly locks the gate behind you. You're bewildered. You've seen prison shows on TV before, but here, there's no inmate intake, no orientation, no briefing on the rules, no supplies given, no cell assignment, nothing. You just sign a document, the police confirm your release date, and you're shoved inside along with a throng of other visitors. But out of the 30 people pushed inside with you, only 2 others are inmates. The rest are sex workers or visiting family and even friends of the inmates inside. They come loaded with supplies for the inmates, and a lot of those supplies include merchandise for a flourishing drug marketplace. The cacophony of shouts, clanging metal, and the buzz of chaotic movement crashes over you as you step into the prison, threatening to drown out your senses. Then a sharp whistle cuts through the noise. You spot a man waving you down, beckoning you forward. He's surprised to see you're an American, but happy you can speak Spanish. He puts a hand on your shoulder and guides you deeper into the prison. There's an air of authority to him, though he wears no uniform, only an Adidas track jacket. But soon you spot others like him, all wearing similar track jackets. Inside a prison with no guards, the inmates run the show, and they've built a sort of legal system for themselves. These track jackets are the official uniform for the prison's enforcers. It's part of their job to bring fresh fish like you in and take them to see one of the 8 delegados, the bosses who run the prison. You get a quick breakdown as you go to see the most senior delegado, who's in charge of initial inmate screening. The prison consists of 8 neighborhoods: Posta, Pinos, Alamos, San Martin, Prefectura, Palmar, Gunay, and Cancha. Posta, Pinos, and Alamos are the wealthy neighborhoods, and entry into them is strictly monitored past sunset. Only those who belong or are on official business from a delegado are allowed in after dark. And if you aren't assigned to live there, you better be out before sunset. Each of the other neighborhoods has everything inmates need to survive, all built, operated, and maintained by inmates themselves. This includes laundries, restaurants, grocery stores, even gaming halls to play pool or video games. The supplies these places need to run are brought in from the outside by visitors. The state provides nothing for the prisoners except for one single meal a day made up of a watery soup. That means you're gonna have to earn your keep. The enforcer tells you as he hurries you along to an office area near the main gates. This is where the chief delegado works, though he lives in the most luxurious part of the prison known as La Posta. In the poorest neighborhood, known as the drug den, residents can live 8 or 10 to a single room. Many, however, simply lie on the cold concrete, huddling in between the crowded buildings for a scrap of shelter. But in La Posta, the chief delegado enjoys the luxury of a 3-story apartment complete with a hot tub and satellite television. It's more cramped than an even small apartment in the real city outside of the walls, but it is large enough to be comfortable inside of the tight confines of the walled-in prison. Such construction has been undertaken completely by the inmates, the supplies brought in from the outside. There are entire teams of contractors even now who are working on a new building not far from the prison center. They are all inmates, including the electricians and the plumbers who will add the finishing touches. Over the years, the prison complex has swelled from the 250 inmates it was built to house to over 3,000 residents today. What was once a facility has evolved into a community, complete with multiple churches and a plethora of full-time businesses. You finally arrive at what's basically an intake interview with the chief delegado. It's an opportunity for the man in charge to show his face and make sure that new prisoners know who is the top dog. A drug trafficker on the outside, he hasn't missed a beat behind bars. With a cell phone clipped to his hip and a desktop computer connected to the internet, his business continues to thrive. He introduces himself, then he goes over the prison rules. There aren't many. Don't kill anyone without permission. Don't steal from anyone. Don't touch any of the women or children. That's right, the prison is overflowing with both women and children who live, work, and go to school inside the prison. Most of them are the wives or girlfriends of inmates who have had no choice but to follow their man into the prison complex. Bolivia has no social welfare programs, and it's even more dangerous out on the streets than it is inside the prison. The delegado continues. If you want housing, they have a real estate office set up where you can buy or rent a place to stay in one of the 8 neighborhoods. Many of the wealthier inmates will actually buy small apartments for themselves, and then they sell them at the end of their prison sentence. Just like in the real world, the real estate market tends to grow over time and property increases in value. Many turn a nice profit after a 10 or 20-year sentence. Most inmates, however, rent their cell, which can be either a spot inside a cramped room for as little as 3 bolivianos a month, just under 50 cents, or a luxury apartment for several hundred bolivianos a month. You came prepared, and you've got enough cash both at hand and inside a bank account to secure yourself a spot in one of the middle-class neighborhoods. You'll share a comfortable cell for the rest of your imprisonment, but it has its own bathroom and many modern amenities like a television and a bed. It's an incredible luxury for a place like this, but one that the delegado is happy to provide as long as you can keep paying the rent. When he asks what skills you have, though, he is pleasantly surprised to find out that you were trained as an electrician. Technical skills are in short supply and high demand, and in the eyes of the delegado, you just shot up exponentially in value. Not a bad way to start off your prison sentence in one of the world's toughest prisons, but you have no idea that there is going to be a price to pay for the favor you just garnered. The delegado negotiates a salary with you. The prison's electrical grid is completely operated and developed by the inmates, tapping into commercial power supplied by the city. Each new building extension needs its own wiring, and the electrical grid itself is in constant need of repair as it runs haphazardly across the sprawling complex. It's not uncommon for an inmate high on any number of drugs readily available to electrocute themselves on the exposed wiring. Your salary will cover your rent and provide money to buy food at the prison's grocery stores or restaurants. You basically set yourself up for a lower middle-class life inside the prison, and the delegado promises better opportunities if you prove yourself competent and stay out of trouble. He's always in bad need of skilled technicians, but they can be hard to retain due to the inherent prison dangers and rampant drug use. In a way, the delegado's entire operation starts to remind you a bit of a corporation, though one made up entirely of the most violent offenders in Bolivia, as you're about to find out. The delegado assigns you to a supervisor who you'll meet later today. But for now, he waves you off along with the enforcer who will show you where you'll be staying. The enforcer and 2 of his compatriots move you through the complex, and you note the number of children running around and playing in full view of murderers, drug traffickers, and more. Men and women freely and openly consume hard drugs next to groups of children playing. You can't help but feel bad for the next generation, as you wonder what shot at life they really have. There's several original buildings, and you can tell these by their age and construction. They're uniform in building materials and style, while the rest of the prison is a ramshackle mess of whatever materials could be procured. However, the original buildings are in a state of constant disrepair, given the century or so the compound has existed. And the entire thing has an almost post-apocalyptic vibe to it. You move through open plazas built to allow the population to socialize and into a mess of labyrinthine hallways and alleyways. You make a note to avoid those after dark. Violence is common despite the delegado's rules, and this includes stabbing and assaults. It rarely happens to women, though. One of the enforcers tells you it's usually men preying on other weaker men. Finally, you arrive at your apartment. "You got money for stuff?" asks one of the enforcers. There's not much in the apartment except for what belongs to your roommate and a single empty bed. "Yeah," you nod, patting the wallet in your pocket. You just made a stupid mistake. The enforcers take a quick look around. Confident nobody's watching, they shove you into the apartment and leap on you. They beat you, but they don't use any of the makeshift weapons they wear on their hip. Hands and fists, punches and kicks. Bad enough to hurt, but not to cause serious injury. Then they rip the wallet out of your pocket and take your cash before leaving you alone in the room to tend to your wounds. As an American, you had a target on your back the moment you walked in, but the men were jealous of how quickly you earned the chief delegado's trust and took such a nice apartment for yourself. Most of them live in another neighborhood, not in the poorest area, but in what would be called the upper-lower class. Violence is supposed to be sanctioned only by the delegados, but everyone knows it happens frequently and with little warning. You're lucky, though, because you're valuable to someone powerful, so the men only beat you enough to leave bruises and a split lip. Not bad enough to seriously hurt you. As you groan on the floor, you realize you have zero recourse. Who are you going to tell about the beating? The delegado made it clear that you don't go to the police for anything. You only come to a delegado or their enforcers. But what enforcers are you going to snitch on other enforcers to? It's a trap and a good lesson for your first day in San Pedro. You have no money, at least not on you. Your attorney helped you set up a special bank account before coming to prison, but none of the stores here take electronic payments of any kind. You'll have to get a hold of your lawyer to get some badly needed cash. Your first paycheck from your official job as a prison electrician doesn't come for 2 weeks yet. You'll be earning around 10 Bolivianos, close to $1.45. A decent wage here, all things considered. With the prison reliant on the skills of whoever gets sent through its gates, your abilities are both rare and in incredibly high demand. At least you got that going for you. But to get word to your lawyer, you'll have to rely on the messaging service the prisoners have set up on the inside and the outside of the prison, and they'll be expecting you to pay for it. So you'll have to scrounge up some money some other way. There are several loan sharks in the prison who will be glad to get you some emergency cash, but at a significant interest rate, and if you don't pay, they're not content with just beating you. They'll do that, and they'll put you to work to earn the money back. There's nothing you can do but wait for the one meal a day the prison does provide, so you sit outside your cell and you watch. Prostitution is abundant and obvious as drug peddling. Right there in the courtyard of your own neighborhood, children laugh and play in a grimy 4-foot-deep concrete fountain. Its filthy water is littered with discarded cigarette butts and scraps of trash. Just a few feet away, a heroin user leans against the wall, pulling a needle from his arm, his glazed eyes oblivious to the world around him. 2 women, obviously prostitutes, walk new clients back to their cells, while other men who can't afford their services stare hungrily. You've been warned about watching your back at night. Even if your neighborhood is one of the safest, there's a risk of robbery, beatings, and assault. The soup arrives, and it's a mad dash to the front of the prison, where the guards have let the workers in with giant pots full of it. The guards themselves don't dare step inside the prison, though. At most, there's only ever 20 of them versus 3,000 inmates. Last time there was a major riot, the police were helpless. They concentrated all their efforts on making sure the prisoners didn't break through the main gate, firing tear gas and water cannons through the gate at the prisoners inside. The workers make sure that every inmate registered with the prison archives receives 1 bowl of soup. For many, it is the only meal they get all day. Unskilled prisoners are hard up for work, or they simply spend their money on drugs and sex. When you get your bowl, you realize it's mostly water with a few sparse bits of meat and noodles. Nowhere near the 2,000 calories a day the average person needs to survive. You don't know anyone yet, so you sit by yourself, which immediately puts predators onto your scent. You're obviously not Bolivian, which makes most people hesitate before messing with you. It's not fear of retaliation from the police, but from one of the delegados. You're probably useful to them somehow. Many American, European, and even Chinese who ended up in San Pedro are heavily involved in the drug trade. But there's also the fact that the delegados have a standing order not to mess too much with Americans or Europeans. They don't want the attention from governments who might actually put pressure on Bolivia to reform its prison system. You got real privilege here, and that makes a lot of people hate you for it. You decide to stick near the Adidas tracksuit jacket-wearing enforcers And on your way home, you stick to the sunlit paths as much as possible. On your way back, you pass a full-blown fight between two of the prisoners. A small crowd is cheering them on, and you can't help but cast a glance over at the enforcers. But the enforcers aren't prison guards, and this isn't a normal prison. Fighting is perfectly fine here, to a point. The rules are that you don't kill without permission from a delegado, and anyone well-connected or of special interest requires permission from the head delegado himself. But that rule is interpreted less as don't kill and more as don't get caught killing. You quickly learn that fights like this out in the open aren't the ones you have to worry about. If someone picks a fight with you in a public space, it's a pretty safe brawl. It's even encouraged by the enforcers to keep tempers cooler. Arguments are better settled with fists than with shivs or machetes in the dark corners of the prison. The guards can't control what happens inside, and largely the state doesn't care. But it seriously frowns on killing. That's why sanctioned murders are so rare and need delegado approval. But there is one type of murder that is always sanctioned, as you find out tonight. The fighters wail on each other until one of them is knocked down. A friend of his jumps into the fight, and this is where the enforcers intervene. A one-on-one fight is fair, but even they fear a full-blown riot the same way a regular prison guard does. To deter more violence, they disperse some of their own, lashing out with batons, canes, even their fists. Eventually, the crowd disperses, and the two combatants are left to pick up a few teeth off of the dirt. You heard there's even a dentist here, but while he uses regular dentist tools, the state doesn't provide any of the drugs for sedation or to fight off infection. That's fine though, because drugs flow freely into the prison via the hundreds of daily visitors. It's cheaper to buy the drugs here than in the rest of the country. Bolivia is a major producer of cocaine, and it has some of the best cocaine chemists in the world. Inevitably, they end up in jail here, where they continue to ply their trade. The lower class's drug of choice is cocaine paste. It's made up of dried coca powder with various chemicals to enhance and prolong the high. It's very powerful. Low-level drug offenders often taken in for petty crimes like selling marijuana end up powerfully addicted to hard drugs due to the quality and the abundance. You aim to steer clear of any drugs despite them being the preferred way to spend one's prison sentence. Making your way back to your cell, you finally get to meet your cellmate who has just gotten off his shift working on a building extension to the chief delegado's personal apartment. He's adding a fourth floor, which will allow him to be up above the walls of the prison themselves. And despite the obvious benefits from doing so, the state doesn't care. Your roommate goes over the basics of prison life, the same stuff the delegado told you about. He's glad to hear you'll be working in construction with him. Despite everything, he seems like a decent enough guy. You find out he's in prison for tax charges, which he claims were fraudulently levied on him after he refused to pay a bribe. You have no way of knowing if he's lying or not, but given the vast scope of corruption in the Bolivian government, it is a believable story. If it is true, it highlights the perplexing nature of San Pedro. Inside the same prison, with absolutely no separation, are murderers and drug dealers alongside white-collar criminals. Even first-time low-level offenders get thrown in here. The state makes no effort to separate offenders by their level of offense, simply throwing them all into the same prison and letting them sort themselves out. This inevitably leads to an explosion in criminal activity once the prisoners are released. Low-level offenders are introduced to powerful crime figures who take them under their wing. There's no social services in Bolivia, so a 1 or 2 year sentence turns into crime school, with low-level offenders graduating to hardened criminals upon release. They turned to crime because they were poor. They went to prison poor and they got out poor. There's no chance to break the chain at any step. The only thing Bolivia's justice system does is make better crooks. Night falls and you hear enforcers outside start to whistle loudly. Your roommate jumps off his mattress and waves you over. Something big is going on. The delegado in charge of your neighborhood wants everyone in the main plaza. Rushing out of your cell, you see a crowd already gathered in the heart of your neighborhood. On two sides are housing quarters, and on the other, a restaurant and grocery store opposite a large Catholic church staffed by missionary volunteers. The missionaries are nowhere to be seen. What you do see, though, is a man with his hands tied behind his back, being held by 3 enforcers. The man's face is already bruised and bloody, and through the swelling, you recognize him as one of the prisoners who were processed in with you earlier today. Your roommate shakes his head in disgust as you join the crowd, which is now starting to hurl insults at the beaten man. You want to ask your roommate what's going on, but the delegado calls for everyone to be silent. Standing on a stepladder to be seen by all, he pulls out a sheet of paper from his pocket and he motions to the man. Carefully, he reads out the paper, a list of charges the man was tried and found guilty for by Bolivia's courts. one of the few court systems in the world where you are presumed guilty until found innocent. Murder. The victim was a young girl that he had assaulted first. The crowd roars in anger. The delegado scans the crowd as he finishes reading out the details of the crime. These were facts that should have been confirmed to the prisoner's official record, accessible only to high-ranking officials within the prison system. Yet, the entire neighborhood now knows about them. The delegado has to call for silence multiple times as the crowd howls in anger, the man staring dumbly down at his feet. "You know how we handle people like that here," the delegado shouts out. As if on cue, one of the enforcers pushes him forward and toward the concrete fountain where earlier today children had been playing. He swings with a short metal pipe, connecting with the back of the prisoner's head. The man staggers forward as the other enforcers fall upon him, beating him with their bare fists or various weapons. The beating lasts a few minutes as the crowd cheers its approval. Finally, there's a loud whistling, and the delegado claps his hands loudly to demand silence. Approaching the battered man lying in a pool of his own blood, he nudges him with his foot. The man groans slightly in response, still alive. Then the delegado turns to his enforcers and nods at the concrete pool. The crowd cheers again as the man is picked up by his shoulders and dragged to the pool. The crowd simply disperses after the man's death. Nobody even bothers to look after the body. The volunteer missionaries will retrieve it and alert the authorities, who will quietly remove it. There will be no investigation. The death won't even make it into the newspapers. State officials will simply shrug their collective shoulders and notify the next of kin. Cause of death? Accident. There's no official lights out or curfew or anything like that. In better neighborhoods, though, there is a restriction on people entering, usually shortly after sunset. With nothing else to do and your stomach still rumbling in hunger, you head back to your cell, grateful at least that you're privileged enough to afford a semi-private space with your own bed. There's no getting out of this. A pair of grimy handcuffs cut into your wrists. You shuffle along in your leg irons, questioning your life choices as you climb the bus stairs. A guard snarls at you from behind his aviators, and the reality starts to hit. You're about to do hard time. In today's episode of the Infographics Show, we'll tell you what happens in the first 24 hours in prison. As you find a seat on the prison bus, you wonder how many people have sat here before you. It's just another day at work for the officers, but for you, it's the worst day of your life. You're frightened out of your mind. The little guy that sits down next to you is obviously as afraid as you are. You offer a timid smile and mumble hello, something you'll regret by this time tomorrow. You'll soon learn that in prison it's better to find out what someone's in for before you get friendly with them. No one speaks on what is the most uncomfortable journey of your life. A mean-looking prisoner glances your way, sizing you up. Every inch of you screams, "Victim." You're a lamb among wolves, but at least you've seen enough prison shows to know to keep your head down, so that's exactly what you do. After 3 long, agonizing hours, the bus pulls up outside of what'll be your home for the next few years. Looking through the window, you see a huge concrete structure surrounded by a mass of steel and razor wire fencing. One by one, you all shuffle off the bus. Armed guards pat each of you down. You're all herded through metal detectors into an indoor waiting area where a stony-faced guard takes off your handcuffs and shackles. All around you are glum faces. It's like a funeral. In a booking area, you answer some basic questions, and pointing to a room, a guard tells you what you've been expecting, dreading. First, that wedding band on your finger. It's gotta go. It has some stones in it in prison that could either gain you some serious leverage or get you a good beating. Your ring, your wallet, and keys are cataloged and put in a secure bag. They'll be placed in storage until your release. As for your cash, you're allowed $200 in your prisoner trust account, and another $200 will be added to your prisoner's telephone account. "Strip," says the guard. Suddenly, you feel like all eyes are on you. You want to get this over with as quickly as possible. Now you're naked. You feel like an animal, an experiment. Any distinguishing marks, you're asked? Tattoos? No, but a scar on your left arm. It was a drunken skiing accident, you joke, trying to lighten things up, but the guard is not laughing. He records the birthmark on your backside. At least if you're beaten beyond recognition, they'll know who you are. The guard tells you to lift your arms. He sounds bored, like he's done this a million times before. It is the most humiliating few minutes of your whole life, and he's probably thinking about what he'll have for lunch. He motions for you to lift your testicles. You reluctantly comply. Could this get any worse? Oh yeah, it definitely could. It's time for the cavity search. You wonder if this is really necessary, as he tells you to squat and cough. You never even have smoked a joint, never mind rearranging someone's face with a butt-smuggled shiv. He runs his fingers through your hair and checks your mouth. This guard is way less friendly than the ones you've seen on TV.
You get some slip-on shoes, a washcloth, 2 blankets, 2 sheets, a pillowcase, and some soap and shampoo. Back in the holding room, you wait. There will be a lot of waiting today. The same guard later appears and hands you an ID card with your prisoner number on it. 12947-027. You are a number, not a name. They take your picture and they fingerprint you. It's time for orientation. The guard tells you all the rules, a list of don'ts, and an explanation of what will happen if you do. Everything you do from now on, your every movement will be controlled and monitored. You are the property of the U.S. government. At least the nurses and medical staff are more friendly. They take your blood pressure and pulse and ask you questions about your health and the state of your mind. No, you're not withdrawing from addictive drugs. No, you've never self-harmed and you don't have any intention of doing so. After even more waiting around, a stressed-out-looking guy in a cheap suit asks you a series of questions. You're told it's of the utmost importance to answer honestly. He asks if you've worked for law enforcement. Any reason why you can't be in general population? Are you a gang member? The closest you've ever come to a gang is watching The Wire. The man asking the questions is polite and has a friendly manner. But one thing you still find it hard to get over is for them it's all in a day's work. And for you, it's a life-changing experience. A little later, your name is called. It's time to go to the housing unit. The guard takes you down a corridor. There are surveillance cameras everywhere. You get to a door and there's a loud buzzing sound followed by the clanking of a bolt unlocking. You walk through some more doors, fluorescent lights buzzing above your head, and suddenly you're in a yard surrounded by buildings. The guard points to a building at the other side of the yard. It looks like it was designed by Soviet-era architects. He tells you find the unit officer in there. You open the door and you're hit by the smell of floor cleaner and sweat. The noise is almost deafening, a mix of laughter, anger, and anguish. Men are sitting by tables in the main area, which is surrounded by 3 floors of cells. There's a net hanging in the middle. Sure, you've seen that on TV. You know why it's there. But right now, you really know why it's there. You were expecting to see bars, but the openings to the cells are doors with safety glass windows and a small metal flap. Prisoners are out on the landings, some are playing cards and chess. They all look at you as you walk over to the unit officer. It is the most intimidating walk of your life. You keep your head down but try to look confident. Don't act tough, but don't look weak. It goes through your mind that any one of these men could be a killer. They can smell your weakness from a mile away. Not for a second do you think any of them could be just like you, a regular person who made a mistake. At least they aren't shouting at you. This is not what you expected. No one is calling you a fish or wolf whistling or telling you that you'll be someone's boyfriend soon. Although you do hear someone say fresh meat. Too right, you are fresh meat. You're human wagyu to these guys. The prisoners seem to lose interest as you report to the unit officer. He gives you your cell details and tells you to go find it. Wait, you think there's no advice, no sympathy for the new guy? No affectionate pat on the back? There, new guy, don't worry, you'll be all right. Nope, he treats you like a hardened criminal. It hits you again, you're alone. These guards are not your protectors. They don't care where you come from or what you've done in your life. They're not going to stick up for you if someone gives you a hard time. You'll soon find this out the hard way. You reach the cell door. What are you supposed to do now? Knock? Walk right in? You wait outside. You can hear laughter behind your back, so you just walk in. There's a guy lying on a bed. He's about 45. Well, probably closer to 35, but with an extra 10 years of hard knocks written onto his face. The cell is dingy. Close to the door, there's a stainless steel toilet attached to a sink and a small counter. There's a paper plate on it. What are you supposed to say? Hi, how are you? 100 thoughts flash through your head. The good news is your cellie's appearance is skinny, pale, bald on top, ponytail in the back, and it doesn't immediately give you the impression he's a tough guy. Then there's a bang at the door. Your cellie motions with his eyes for you to open it, as if he knew this was going to happen. A heavily tattooed prisoner walks right in and tells you to show him your paperwork. Your cellie says under his breath, your charges. You get the feeling that his request is non-negotiable. Now you understand. You've heard about the Convict Code, KOS, kill on sight, for offenders who hurt women or children. You show the guy your papers and he laughs. You got 4 years for that, homie? It's true, 4 years for shoplifting is a harsh sentence, but not when it was your 11th offense for the same type of crime. You're a self-confessed kleptomaniac, a middle-class phone thief. Your lawyer tried to explain the psychological aspect at the trial, but the judge thought some prison time would do you some good. The guy hands you back your papers and walks out, still smiling. Your cellie introduces himself as Chris, but people call him Nasty.
He's got Nasty tattooed on his neck in italics, next to a love heart. He's saying something, but all you can think about is what does a man have to do to acquire the nickname Nasty? Nasty explains that the guy who just asked for your paperwork was sent by the shot caller, the boss who runs things in the unit. Disobey the rules and you'll be punished. You almost laugh, but quickly you realize that the convict code is how these men operate. You naively think you'll be okay because you never need to fight. Oh boy, you have a lot to learn. Nasty later tells you that he has to take a dump and now the cell doors are locked, so here comes another new experience in your short life so far. A grown man blasting a stainless steel bowl with salvos of fecal matter as you sit like a frightened child behind your bedsheet. Man, you think, I am never going to poop in here in front of him, never. Oh, you will. When you're called for dinner later, the chow hall is completely segregated. One of the strangest things about this whole experience so far is it's kind of like childhood, like school or scouts, but with the very grown-up addition of a sliced face as a punishment for a wrongdoing. The lights are burning bright. There's a constant din of conversation and laughter. People are looking at you. They glance up from their trays, give you a cursory inspection, and carry on eating. Guys push in front of you in the queue. It's not that you allow this, but what are you supposed to do? Start a fight over an extra few seconds wait? Nasty told you if someone punks you, you have to fight no matter what. If you don't, you'll be bullied your entire time here. You try to widen your shoulders and squeeze up close to the guy in front. He looks around and shoots you a penetrating stare. You step back and step on someone's foot. It's like primary school bullying, but with knives. After about 15 minutes, you get your food, a tray with what looks like a cardboard hamburger, a dollop of slimy mashed potato, dried out green beans, some kind of sugary juice, and what looks like a 3-year-old slice of ultra-mega processed cake. Oh, and there's an apple too, the only part of the meal that you completely trust. You get lucky and you find a space where you can sit alone. A prudent decision until you better understand prison politics. Just as you're finishing, that little guy from the bus sits next to you. Seems like the whole chow hall is watching. You have indoor recreation time from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. There's a gym, but it's only for daytime recreation. Same with the yard. Not knowing anyone to play chess or cards with, you go into a common room and watch Shark Week on the Discovery Channel. You hear a scream outside. Everyone rushes to the door to see what's happening. Your bus friend is on the floor, blood gushing out of his nose. Everyone sits back down as if nothing has happened. You wonder what the guy did to deserve what must have been a punch to the face. When you're both back in your cell, Nasty explains that the guy is a chomo. What? He hurt children. You think back to your interview this morning and wonder why this guy didn't ask to be put into protective custody or administrative segregation. The strangest thing is, Nasty somehow knows that you talked to this guy on the bus in the morning. News certainly travels fast. Now you've been associated with the very worst kind of prisoner, says Nasty. He takes a little piece of paper and attaches it to what looks like fishing line. It's actually dental floss. He then sticks something to it to give it weight. I wouldn't do this if you weren't my cellie, he tells you. Then he starts flicking his message under the cell door, and in a few minutes something comes back. He tells you he's taking a big risk doing this. Tomorrow, he says, you should make a call home to your wife. Get her to put $200 in this commissary account. He gives you the account details. You've befriended a chomo, punishable by a beating that you can now avoid by paying a shot caller. Nasty says he'll act as a go-between. He can protect you, for now. 9 p.m. is final count. You lie on the bed wondering how on earth you've managed to have such a bad first day. Thank God you've got someone as understanding as Nasty in the same cell. The lights are turned off at 11. The block is silent except for the occasional nightmarish shriek. The next morning at 5:30 a.m., you're called to the chow hall for breakfast. You look at no one as you eat your oatmeal and what tastes like powdered scrambled eggs. You also get milk and even more of that sweet juice. Later in the morning, you're told you can go to the yard. You stand in the middle of hundreds of prisoners, just waiting for a knife to be plunged into your neck. Staying in your cell, Nasty said, would elicit suspicion. At 11, you make a phone call, $11.35 for a 15-minute call from your prepaid account. You tell your wife you'll explain everything later. You return to your cell. It's empty. Nasty is gone. When you ask a prisoner, someone who seems genuinely friendly and sympathetic, what happened, he says that he asked to be put in segregation. You'll find out Nasty wasn't in for fighting on behalf of his girlfriend, like he told you, but for a scheme defrauding elderly people out of money. It just so happened that a grandson of one of the pensioners that he scammed managed to get himself transferred to this prison. He was planning to stick a shiv in Nasty. You tell the prisoner about the $200 you paid Nasty, and he starts laughing so much he almost falls over. That kid from the bus who was beaten up wasn't a chomo, he says. He just disrespected someone. He banged into a guy and didn't apologize. Your new friend tells you the first rule in prison is to be polite. After that, he says, don't lend, borrow, or gamble. And for God's sake, be careful who you trust. You have a lot to learn.
Prison, the final frontier for some, a place where they end their days. Others will get to leave, but they'd wish they'd never stepped foot inside. Here are 50 things nobody tells you about prison. Number 50. We'll start with the USA, the country that can claim to lock more of its citizens up than any other, and by a long way too. According to 2020 data, there were 2.3 million U.S. citizens behind bars. But when we say bars, that includes federal and state prisons, jails, juvenile correctional facilities, and immigration detention facilities. Just so you know, these numbers are not exactly stable, but close. People enter and leave facilities all the time. Number 49. It works out to around 639 people behind bars for every 100,000 people. The U.S. is still number 1 in per capita terms. Here are the countries that follow up in the top 10. The number is per 100,000. El Salvador, 562. Turkmenistan, 552. Palau, 552. Rwanda, 511. Cuba, 510. Maldives, 449. Virgin Islands, UK, 447. Thailand, 443. The Bahamas, 442. Let's stick with numbers for now. We'll get around to the messed up stories soon. We promise. Number 48. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, in the U.S., 600,000 people enter prison every year, but that's nothing compared to jail. Around 10.6 million Americans enter jail every year. If you're wondering why that number is so high, it's because many people get out of jail very quickly once they've got bail. Some of them already have been convicted for small crimes, so stay there for a while. They number around 160,000 people a year. 1/4 of people who go to jail will be there again after release within a year. Another reason for staying in jail is the simple fact that many poor people can't afford to make bail. In 2019, the Chicago Tribune wrote that of the 5,736 inmates in Cook County Jail, 5,390 were waiting for a trial. Half of them couldn't afford to pay bail, or they didn't have a place to stay where they could be electronically monitored. That begs the question, how many are innocent? Number 47. It's hard to say because statisticians tell us that a person is 9 times more likely to say they are guilty of a misdemeanor crime if they can't make bail. They just want to move things on, even if they're innocent. In fact, 95% of cases never go to trial. People take plea bargains, sometimes if they're innocent. That doesn't mean prisons are teeming with innocent people, but quite a few people have been wrongly convicted of a crime. The Innocence Project says it's between 2.3% and 5% of prisoners in the U.S. Other sources put it as high as 10%. But why? Number 46. The answer is for many reasons. Some innocent people take a plea, especially if they think they have a less than great lawyer and they've been convinced that if the case goes to trial, they're looking at a hefty prison sentence. In court, an innocent person could lose because of prosecutorial misconduct, or because a witness lied, or even a cop lied. Maybe during the interrogation, the police were somewhat heavy-handed and the victim was overwhelmed. Let's now look at an extreme case when this happened. Number 45. We've picked on the US enough for now, so now we'll sail across the pond to the UK. In 1974, a 17-year-old council worker named Stephen Downing confessed to murdering a 32-year-old woman named Wendy Sewell. The case would become known as the greatest miscarriage of justice the UK had ever seen, although that's questionable given witches were burned there. Anyway, this young lad first told cops he found the woman at the cemetery where he was working as a groundskeeper. He said he moved her body and that's why he got blood on him. He was interrogated for 9 long hours. He also had learning difficulties, and there wasn't any lawyer with him during the questioning. Guess what? At the end of the grueling interrogation, he'd said he'd done it. He was given a long sentence with the condition that he could meet with a parole board after 10 years. Inmates believed this guy had hurt a woman, so he was beaten badly and he had to change prisons 8 times. Later, he was caught in something called the innocent prisoner's dilemma. He couldn't be paroled because he refused to say he committed the crime. Talk about a catch-22. It's actually not that uncommon. We won't get too much into it, but the whole case was shambles. He should have never been sent to prison. The cops knew this. One journalist that tried to help Downing told the BBC that the police harassed him. He said, "They made my life absolute hell for 5 or 6 years. I was pulled over for speeding, stopped and searched, victimized. I was very worried for my family." Downing got out after 27 years, and subsequent investigations found that the police in the past had done some very sketchy work indeed. On release, he received around $1 million in compensation and became a chef. He told the press, "I never allowed myself to feel angry or bitter. Who could I have taken it out on anyway? I still refuse to." Number 44.
The vast majority of prisoners in the US are not in for violent offenses. We looked at the latest 2021 data from the US Bureau of Prisons and saw that 46.2% of prisoners were in for drug offenses. No other crime came close, although offenses relating to weapons, explosives, and arson accounted for 20.2% of prisoners. Every 25 seconds, someone is arrested for drug possession in the US, although they don't all end in prison, of course. Number 43. We looked into drug possession offenses, and it is a very contentious issue. One reason is that drugs are widely available in prisons. In fact, there are reports stating that people have gone in for possessing soft drugs and got addicted to hard drugs inside to deal with the mental issues they faced. The vast majority of prisoners in for drugs are not trafficking drug kingpins, they're merely addicts. Research shows that importers or high-level suppliers only amount to 11% of drug offenders doing hard time. On top of that, there's ample data to suggest that more poor people get stopped by cops and more of them go to prison for drug offenses than middle-class or wealthy people. As the Marshall Project said, rich drug abusers go to treatment, not prison. The UK Guardian echoed that, saying, "The wealthy make mistakes, the poor go to jail." The story said you're much more likely to have a drug problem if you've suffered trauma growing up or grown up poor. Prison is like a double whammy. Pew Research said this: more imprisonment does not reduce state drug problems. Pew discovered that the deterrent of prison hasn't and doesn't stop people from taking drugs. This is why this is one very big hot potato of a subject. Okay, enough of that. Who served the most time ever? Number 42. We found a few names. Paul Geidel served 68 years in the US after being convicted of second-degree murder in 1911. Weird thing is, it's looking like a parole board might have released him in 1926 because of his good behavior, but then he was found to be legally insane. He could have gotten out after 63 years, but by then he was so institutionalized that he chose to stay in another 5 years. He died a free man in 1987, aged 93. Number 41. Francis Clifford Smith served over 71 years in prison for the murder of a night watchman in 1950 in Connecticut. In 2020, he was moved to a nursing home. Now you'll see how innocent men can spend many years behind bars. Number 40. In 1972, age 26, Richard Phillips went to prison an innocent man. He was released 46 years later. He wrote this poem a few years into his incarceration. Ain't it a crime when you don't have a dime to buy back the freedom you've lost? Ain't it odd that when you pray to God, your prayers don't seem to be heard? Ain't it sad when you've never had the freedom of a soaring bird? He was finally exonerated in 2018 and later told he received $1.5 million in compensation. He told the media, "I just want to keep a low profile, travel, and enjoy life. That's what I've wanted to do in the first place." Number 39. In a paper titled Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, it was said that 4% of people in the US on death row are probably innocent in the past and right now. Number 38. 18 people in the US have gotten off death row after DNA testing proved that they were innocent. They had collectively served 229 years. Sometimes innocent people get executed too, as you'll now see. Number 37. A U.S. man named Cameron Todd Willingham was executed in 2004, and later his innocence was proved after the case was said to have been heavily flawed. His last words were, "The only statement I want to make is that I'm an innocent man, convicted of a crime I did not commit." This is what an investigator later said. The whole case was based on the purest form of junk science. Johnny Garrett was executed in the US in 1992, and later DNA evidence proved he was innocent. It said he didn't want to share any last words, although some sources say he said, "I'd like to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me. The rest of the world can kiss my..." We omitted one word. When innocent Florida man Jesse DeFaro was executed in 1990, Old Sparky malfunctioned, and witnesses said what they saw was pure horror. The South Florida Sun-Sentinel wrote, "Flames and smoke erupted from his head." Now you'll see that executions of innocent people don't only happen in the USA. Number 36. In Russia in 1983, a man named Alexander Kravchenko was executed for murder. Turns out that the killer was none other than the butcher of Rostov, Andrei Chikatilo. In 1950, a man named George Kelly was hanged in the UK for murder. There had been unbelievable police corruption in the case. The cops basically set him up. In fact, police had the confession of another man, but since they'd made a mess of the case, they held that information back. In 1989, a man named Tang Jingxiang was executed in China for the murder of a woman. That woman later turned up to the surprise of everyone. Jingxiang had committed no crime at all. Number 35. Prisoners get drunk while locked up on alcohol they make themselves. It's sometimes called hooch or pruno, or prison wine. The best brewers can earn okay money from selling it. One former prisoner said you can sell half a gallon of wine for 25 bucks. Each pant leg makes 2.5 gallons, so you do the math. It's a good hustle. He said he cut pant legs and sewed the bottoms and lined them with plastic bags. Then he filled them with water. After that, he threw in 5 pounds of sugar, loaded diced tomatoes, and tomato paste. He then let that all ferment. Other prisoners have used bread for yeast. As for the sweetness, any kind of fruit works, but you can also add candy. It's important to burp the bag. We saw a guy in a podcast who said he'd forgotten to do that, and he got covered in the stuff when it exploded. Number 34. Another thing prisoners will pay good money for is mobile phones. It's not easy getting them in. Sometimes an officer can be tempted with cash or even threatened. Other times the phones are plugged in the rear, which you can imagine can be quite uncomfortable. For a run-of-the-mill phone, you might be able to charge $1,000 US inside prison. Number 33. In 2015, Brazilian prison officers discovered a unique way prisoners were getting phones inside. They used cats. One cat that frequently went in and out of the prison was found with 4 mobile phones, 4 chargers, and 7 cards attached to it. Number 32. Just how much a man can plug is anyone's guess, but we saw a documentary where an officer showed how a prisoner had plugged a foldable knife. The British Prime Minister was recently given a lesson on such acts when he learned some British prisoners were hiding Kinder eggs in themselves filled with drugs. Number 31. Why would people go to such an effort, you might ask? The answer is the markup. Drugs in prison are way more expensive than on the outside. So much so, officers might sometimes get in on the dealing. It's a license to print money, and there's no shortage of prisoners wanting something to take the monotony away. In fact, because opiates can't be detected in urine around 2 to 3 days later, some prisoners get into them even though they just wanted to smoke weed. Weed can be detected up to 21 days after ingestion. One podcast we watched said he took opiates in prison, but every so often he got caught out. He said then he went back to the first floor where he had no privileges. He'd slowly go back to the upper floor where he'd do more opiates, then he got caught again and was sent back down. He called it the merry-go-round. Number 30. Even tobacco is expensive inside. One prisoner said he was getting stuff brought in, and then he charged $2 or $3 for just one small rolled cigarette. That meant that one pouch cheap outside of prison was worth a lot of money. In 2020, in an Irish prison, officers discovered one haul that included mobile phones, 800 grams of weed, 2 grams of cocaine, and 10,000 pills. To give you an idea of how much that's worth, we'll go to another news story that said in the UK in just 2017, 15,000 phones and a massive 189 kilos of drugs were confiscated. A phone in a UK prison might go for $300 to $1,300, and those are low-quality devices. The same article said synthetic drug called spice can cost over 30 times more in prison than on the outside. Cocaine, depending on the quality, might cost $100 on the outside for a gram. That might go for $1,000 on the inside. The markup was even higher for a gram of heroin. This is why some people put eggs in their behind. Number 29. Another way to get stuff in is when violent cons groom officers. That happened to a man named Lee Davies in England. He was on incredibly low pay for such a stressful job, and then he helped some gang members get phones and drugs inside. His money problems were over. He was told to wait in a car park someplace, then a car would pull up and throw something into his car. He then smuggled the package inside, and he kept doing that for months. He was eventually caught. He said later, "There's no excuse for what I did, but I have deep sympathy for people working in that environment." He believes he was partly groomed by the prisoners. Number 28. He started on £20,000 a year, or $27,000. That's a very low wage, but the job has got to be one of the hardest you could do. According to job websites, a starting prison officer's wage might be $31,740 a year in the US. Overstressed and underpaid is what you hear from most officers. They're dealing with violence and outrage, and sometimes severe mental issues almost on a daily basis. Number 27. Then there's what's called the prison industrial complex. Mass incarceration has become a business, one that is booming in the U.S. The American Civil Liberties Union says mandatory minimum sentences helped create the U.S.'s bursting prisons. And on top of that, there was the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. This led to more mass incarceration and massive profits for the private prison industry. There are many kinds of businesses that make money, not just private prisons. You have the food services, handcuff makers, clothes services, and the ones earning from cheap prison labor, and much more. This is how one person put it. The prison industrial complex is not only a set of interest groups and institutions, it's a state of mind. The lure of big money is corrupting the nation's criminal justice system, replacing notions of safety and public service with a drive for higher profits. Number 26. These are some companies benefiting or that benefited from cheap prison labor in the U.S. McDonald's, Walmart, Microsoft, IBM, Target, Intel, Victoria's Secret, yeah, they make lingerie, Honda, Starbucks, Nike, Nintendo. Number 25. If you want to know how much the prisoners make, NPR interviewed a guy that worked at Omaha Correctional Center after getting 8 to 16 years for theft and forgery. He was paid $2.25 a day for a 12-hour shift, but he also said one phone call cost him $5 and a bag of chips also cost him $5. Number 24. For some regular prison work in some prisons, you get nothing. Just getting out of your cell is payment. Prison policy said in Florida, if you're laboring for state-owned industries, you can earn between 20 cents and 55 cents an hour. That seems to be about the going wage. Now for some more prison violence. Number 23. Not surprisingly, prisoners get killed in prison. Gang violence is usually to blame, or at times people are killed for a certain crime they committed on the outside, or someone just gets killed over an argument. In 2008, there were only 40 homicides in U.S. prisons. That number pretty much increased every year. In 2020, the last data we could find, the number was 120. As you'll now see, violence inside the prison is much worse in other countries. Number 22. We looked at prisons and jails in Ecuador and what's been going on in 2021. In February, the BBC reported that 79 people were murdered in 4 different Ecuadorian jails, although they were related to the same gang squabbles. In April, the BBC reported 5 men were murdered and 16 injured in just one Ecuadorian prison, again gang-related. In July, Al Jazeera wrote that 22 men were murdered and many others were injured in 2 prisons in that country. Gang rivalry was to blame, but overcrowding and bad conditions was also mentioned. After that, Ecuador's president declared a state of emergency. Number 21. Okay, so you've all seen the movies that suggest in some US prisons you have to join a gang or you'll either get beaten or exploited. Really, do convicted accountants end up putting in work for the Sureños? It's actually a complex question, but we guess the best people to answer it are folks who've done a lot of prison time. There's no shortage of those people, who now have their own YouTube channel. People say it depends on where you're doing your time, but it might not mean you have to get involved with a gang. Most prisoners give the advice, just keep your head down and do your time. They usually agree on one thing though, and that is you will likely at least need alliances. A British stockbroker agreed. He had the bad idea of starting an ecstasy empire after moving to the US. After being locked up in Arizona, he said the first thing that happened scared the hell out of him. Gang members came into his cell and asked for his papers. He didn't know what that meant. They actually wanted to see what he'd been convicted of to make sure he hadn't hurt society's most vulnerable. In some prisons, that could mean KOS, or kill on sight. It's why some prisoners are housed in protective custody. After he was deemed okay, he said he didn't join a gang, but he also said he made some friends. That made his life much easier. One former prisoner in the US said this: "The commonly held belief that joining a gang is the only way to survive prison is one that I sincerely wish would forever go the way of the dodo. I honestly think it's the gangs themselves that try their hardest to propagate this false notion." Another guy agreed, but he said hanging with your own race in some prisons is a must. He also said this: "In the yard, all the races hang with their own. With the gangs and shot callers, they may take advantage of the weaker ones, making them pay rent and such. But once you stand up for yourself, they'll usually stop and often ask you to join the gang. If you say no, they usually accept it. So no, you won't have to join a gang, but as you'll now see, you also won't be completely independent." Number 20. There's the dining room or chow hall. If you don't get told where to sit by officers, you'll sit with your own race. This is where it helps to have made friends. You certainly have to show respect, so just plonking your behind down without thinking about it will lead to you getting a bust head. One prisoner said at his prison there was what he called short bus tables. These were the tables where anyone could sit, but he said they were reserved for the less respected prisoners. Most former prisoners agree on one thing: it's in the chow hall where you see alliances. Even if you're a fiercely independent person, some former prisoners say going it alone is not recommended. Number 19. In the UK, race doesn't matter all that much. You usually hook up with friends, and if you're a longtime criminal, you'll likely have some. If there are gang rivalries, it's not about the color of your skin, but where you come from. In London or Liverpool, there have been what the media called postcode wars. In some podcasts, former British prisoners from the South said they didn't like getting sent to the northern part of the country and vice versa. Number 18. If you do get attacked in prison, it's sometimes with a homemade knife or shiv. Sometimes it's just with a razor blade. Other times the instrument will have a few razor blades attached close to each other. This is so the wound is almost impossible to stitch. The British media has reported a lot on this. Apparently the wound leaves a really big scar. That's bad, but this is worse. Number 17. One of the most horrendous things prisoners do, and it seems it's not all that uncommon, is throw boiling water in someone's face. They'll usually fill the water with sugar because that makes the water caramelized and sticky. In the past, in the UK, this has been referred to as napalm. After that, you need some good advice. Number 16. Prisoners often talk about the prison code, which to be frank sounds hypocritical and nonsensical a lot of the time. Still, there are some do's and don'ts the prisoners talk about. Do. Keep your head down. Be polite and respectful as much as possible. If you're picked on or attacked, fight back even if you're the lamest fighter in the world. Develop an exercise routine. Study the lay of the land. Educate yourself when something is available. Choose your friends carefully. Maintain good personal hygiene. Don't act tough. Now you're nobody. Gamble. Take drugs. Borrow stuff, even if someone seems really kind. Judge people. Steal. Stare. Talk to everyone about your crime. Fart, if you can help it. Snitch. Number 15. Sometimes inmates locked in their cells create what are called biological projectile weapons. These are to spray officers with urine, feces, or even bile. Just in California, at 3 prisons, there were 111 gassing attacks in 2017. In that state, you get 5 years in segregation for gassing an officer. Number 14. Prisoners sometimes use coded letters to get messages to each other, which might look innocuous, but if you can decode the message, something darker lurks between the words. In 2018, a letter sent from a prisoner to the outside that didn't say anything out of the ordinary was an order to kill a staff member in the Atlanta jail. You just had to read between the lines. Other times, prisoners create their own ciphers, with symbols designating a letter of the alphabet. A gang expert who specializes in breaking codes said about this, "Not knowing what a code says can give us nightmares. We need to know what these gang codes say, but sometimes we need to know what they don't say even more." Number 13. Perhaps one of the strangest things to happen in a woman's prison is someone gets pregnant when they have never had a conjugal visit, like a private visit with a lover or spouse. That happened in 2019. A woman had been behind bars for a year and a half, waiting to be sentenced for capital murder when she had a baby. She'd been charged with being the getaway driver when an elderly man was shot and killed. It later transpired that she'd somehow conspired to get pregnant by sleeping with a male inmate working at the prison. News reports said she hoped to having a new child would sway the judge to grant her some leniency. This next one is heartbreaking. Number 12. The youngest prisoner ever to sit on death row was George Julius Stinney Jr. This African-American boy was arrested in June 1944, charged with killing 2 people. In June, he was executed in the electric chair, and he was so small that a Bible had to be propped under him on the chair. The investigation was an absolute travesty of justice, and the jury that sentenced him was all white. The grave he was buried in was unmarked. In 2014, the Civil Rights and Restorative Justice Project said this: "There is compelling evidence that George Stinney was innocent of the crimes for which he was executed in 1944. There wasn't any substantial evidence to support his guilt, and his defense lawyer was less than useless. In fact, he had no support at all. It was a kid against the racist cops and indeed the racist justice system. The real murderer of Betty June Binnicker and Mary Emma Thames got away." His conviction was overturned in 2014. Number 11. The oldest person executed was Walter Moody. He died by lethal injection in Alabama in 2018. He'd been convicted of killing a judge with a mail bomb in 1989. Number 10. Prison is supposed to rehabilitate. That's why it's there. But often those that go in again. Officers sometimes call the prison gates a revolving door. It's hard to compare recidivism rates worldwide because you have to choose certain years to conduct a study, and there's a lot of data from all over the world. The U.S. National Institutes of Health did a study, but the data was from different years regarding different countries. Nonetheless, it found that the percentage of released prisoners that were arrested for another crime within 2 years in England and Wales was 48%. In France, it was 40%. In Finland, it was 36%. In Norway, it was 20%. In Australia, it was 53%. And in the U.S., it was 60%. Number 9. The U.S. Supreme Court in 2011 called California's recidivism rates stratospherically high. It was said then that a whopping 70% of released prisoners in that state were back behind bars within 3 years. The state's prisons were accused of not rehabilitating but producing additional criminal behavior. That's why prisons are sometimes called crime school. It's hard to fully understand why people end up back in prison, but parole violations and habitual drug use, as well as falling back into poverty and hopelessness, count for something. Critics have said U.S. and other countries' prisons focus a lot more on punishment rather than rehab, which is the opposite of the Norwegian model. As you know, that country has very low recidivism rates. Okay, we think you need to hear some good news. Well, it's kind of positive. Number 8. A British guy named Stephen Akpabio Clementowski was locked up in England in 2002. While serving his 16-year sentence for drugs offenses, he earned a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees. He had 0 qualifications when he went in and started with his GCSEs and A-levels. That's equivalent to junior and senior high school. He worked in the kitchens all day and studied on the toilet at night, where he said it was quiet. He told The Guardian, "Sometimes I wondered how I did it. The idea that you can study in an environment designed for punishment is ridiculous." He said it wasn't easy studying in what he described as a hellish place. "I still have nightmares 10 years after leaving. It's a really damaging environment," he said. He's now a lecturer and a regional manager and spends a lot of time going back into prisons to help prisoners. While he did well locked up, he's still very critical of British justice. He doesn't believe prison acts as a deterrent to crime. He said people aren't being deterred. The number of people in prison has increased by 69% over the last 30 years. They're not being rehabilitated. Number 7. Anthony Ray Hinton spent close to 3 decades in isolation on death row in Alabama. He was exonerated in 2015. He's since written an award-winning book, The Sun Does Shine: How I Found Life and Freedom on Death Row, and was awarded an honorary degree. Now you'll hear about a man who's more locked up than anyone else. Number 6. The British man who spent the longest time in prison is Robert Maudsley. He's been locked away since 1974, but for the last 25 years, he's been in the worst prison cell in the whole of England. He killed 3 men while in prison, and one of those murders earned him the name the British Hannibal the Cannibal. It was a brutal murder, but not as bad as those British tabloids made it out to be. Now he's in a special cell which is underneath the prison. It has thick doors with bulletproof glass. Even when you open the doors, he's actually in a cage within the cell. He's allowed no contact at all with other prisoners. He gets out once a day for an hour, but has to have 6 guards around him at all times. They try not to make eye contact with him or speak to him. He once said, "I am left to stagnate, vegetate, and to regress, left to confront my solitary head-on with people who have eyes but don't see, and who have ears but don't hear, who have mouths but don't speak." Many people have called this inhumane. They know his story and feel sorry for him given his childhood and the nature of the offenses of the people he killed. We won't go into detail, but we think you can work it out. He's possibly the most locked up man in the world. He once said, "I feel like I'm buried alive." The prison wouldn't even allow him to have a pet budgie. Number 5. The polar opposite of this is Bolivia's San Pedro prison. It's more like a village than a prison. There are cells to rent, markets to shop in, and even tourists can visit. Prisoners make cash by selling cocaine paste to them. Wives and children can live with the prisoner. There's also a prison hotel, a soccer pitch, a few churches, and a hospital. Officers work there, but the prisoners themselves ensure bad things don't happen inside. If a prisoner does commit a crime, they are disciplined in, let's say, a very stern way. If they commit a very serious violent crime, they are likely dead soon after. Number 4. We think the biggest prison in the world has to be Turkey's Silivri prison. It spans over 250 acres and is home to more than 10,000 prisoners. Are Turkish prisons bad? Maybe they were in the 70s when hundreds of US citizens occupied them, mostly for smuggling that quality hashish they so loved. When Billy Hayes was a student, he was sent to one. He wrote a book on his release and it became the harrowing movie Midnight Express. He actually escaped in the end. He actually said the movie exaggerated a fair few things. The next country's prisons are bad, and no one denies it. Number 3. One prison with lots of Westerners serving hard time within its walls is Bangkok's Klong Prem prison. Many smugglers have lived there and felt what it's like to sleep with 60-odd men in a cell packed like sardines. One man actually holds a record there to this day. He's a British guy named David McMillan, a former big-time drug smuggler with a rather posh accent. He's the only Westerner ever to have escaped the prison. In prisons such as this, if you have money, you can live well. There's a kind of anarchy in there, and the guards take a piece of everything. McMillan had a personal cook, someone to do his laundry, and he had a cell with few people in it that had a TV. He even had a little office area. But when he heard he would be transferred to Bangkwang Central Prison, aka the Bangkok Hilton, he made a plan to escape. The Thais call this prison the Big Tiger because it eats men. Many that go in die there. McMillan successfully escaped, but the funny part is that once he got to the street, he opened an umbrella he'd taken with him. When asked why he did that, he said, "Escaping prisoners don't carry umbrellas." Number 2. One of the worst prison disasters we could find happened in the US at Ohio State Prison in 1930. There was a huge fire, except the guards wouldn't open the cell doors. One person described it like this: "There was nothing to do but scream for God to open the doors. And when the doors didn't open, all that was left was to stand still and let the fire burn the meat off and hope it wouldn't be too long about it." Some prisoners managed to overpower the guards, but outside those cells they were given orders to shoot and kill. One prisoner later said, "Naturally, all of those men were in there and hollering and screaming for help, and some of the men were praying, and some of them was cussing, and some of them were raving. It was a question to do what you could do to help them." 322 inmates died from the fire or smoke inhalation, and another 230 had to be hospitalized. Okay, let's finish on a positive note. Number 1. There's a prison in Finland called Suomenlinna Prison. The prison walls are actually just a small fence. In the past, it has had problems with prisoners not trying to break out, but people trying to sneak in. The cells are like nice dorm rooms, and the shared kitchens all have the modern appliances you can ask for. Some prisoners are in there for the most serious offenses, but they go to this prison when their term is close to an end. It's kind of like finishing school, the halfway house before prisoners enter society at large. Still, they do their last few years there even though they could easily just walk out. Why, might you wonder? A prison official said this: "The main idea here is to prepare the inmates for release into the community. It doesn't make sense for an inmate to be in a closed prison for say 6 years and to suddenly enter civilian life. We also offer rehabilitation for people who have had problems related to alcohol, drugs, or mental illness."